The Thinking Tackle Podcast.
Welcome to the Thinking Tackle Podcast, and today we are joined by Matt Pettit, who is the head of Embryo Angling Habitats. Now, as well as managing one of the biggest fishery portfolios in the country, Matt is an incredible big carp angler on the quiet. Not that he'd ever admit it, but those who know that Matt has caught a string of mouth-watering carp from some waters under the radar and some that we can talk about. So let's get straight into it and welcome Matt to the podcast. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey Rich, you all right?
Yeah, I'm very good. And actually, what people won't know is that this is the second time I've interviewed you across a table at Corder Towers, albeit a different building.
Yeah.
I think the first time we met, again, like academic point, but the first time we met, I sat in on some interviews for the job you now have with Dan.
Yeah.
The Embryo job. You're the main man at Embryo. How long ago was that, Matt?
That was nearly probably 8 years now.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And talk to us a little bit about, I mean, the job's still good. You're still doing it, Matt. It grows in scope by the minute, presumably.
It does, yeah. Yeah, it's very... I don't think...
There's a great one of him in action there, Rich, for you.
Oh, here we go. Just a procession of...
Yes. Thanks to the boys in the Embryo office for this.
Yeah, absolutely. They were very thrilled with the selection of pictures they sent me.
Is that actually a realistic portrayal of what it's like to be the main man at Embryo, or is in fact are you on the phone, on the road, behind a computer more? What's the score?
That would have been what it was like. Early, it was me, in the first, obviously the first year or two. So it was that, you were out doing everything because there was nothing. There's
no infrastructure. You were Embryo for
how long?
Right. How long were you the sole employee?
I'm not sure. Up until we got Stuart in to do some of the groundwork. So I'm not sure when he actually went in full time. That would have been around the Christmas. So I started in the summer. So it would be from sort of July through till Christmas. It would have just been me.
Which must have been mad. This is a brand new enterprise that, knowing Dan, he would have had ambitious plans for it, and yet you're the only man who can pull those off at that time.
Yeah, I think for the first, even in the first few years, it's grown very quickly recently. There's a lot of guys now. We're a big team of really good people, but for the first 3 or 4 years, it was a very small team of people. So yeah, it's there was a lot. You're doing. You might be involved in stockings. You're doing all the leasing. You're trying to find the lakes. There's a lot goes into that. Probably a bit more than what you first think. And then on top of that, you're trying to organise the lakes that you do get. You've got to put all the stuff in: the swims, the tracks, the roads, the fence. We were running effectively an otter fencing company on the side at the same time. So yeah, it was pretty. And then you're doing the memberships. So you're on holiday, you've got a week off, and then you think, right, I've got to process 3 lakes worth of memberships. So yeah, it was full bore in the early days.
My memory, Matt, is that from your when you came in to see Dan and to have your interview was that. You actually, out of all of the people that we interviewed, you were the kind of one I think who had the most reservations about how your lifestyle would fit with the job, and also leaving a very steady job that you already had. I think in a way, I imagine you didn't play hard to get, but I think you were quite open about the fact that there was a lot to think about before you could even consider taking the job.
Yeah, I think I'll be honest. So when I came down here, my whole attitude was I don't really see how this works. And you have to, ultimately would have to explain to me how
there was longevity in this.
Yeah, because it's sort of, it's like when you've got family commitments and everything else, you don't want to be just jumping into something where there's not an obvious route to what you're doing. And there wasn't an obvious route. But I will say, what Dan's like with his enthusiasm, I went into that interview a bit skeptical of I don't quite understand how this is going to work, and I came out of it thinking, yeah, I want to do that. But, just through that sort of force of personality of what he wanted to do. So yeah, it was interesting.
And how did you explain that to when you got home? How did you explain that to the missus? That you were going to jack it? How long had you been? You'd worked for Coca-Cola, right? Before.
Yeah.
How long had you been with them?
So we started 14 years.
Which is a career, right? That is,
Yeah.
by today's standards, that's a long career.
Yes. Yeah. No.
Pension and stuff and everything was sweet,
Yeah.
if you excuse the pun.
I mean, it's that you can look back in hindsight and think, it's very easy when you're doing something you love, which I do now. You know, it's an absolute no-brainer. But like you say, stuff like the benefits in particular on something like that is it's a gamble to give it up, isn't it? And
But Coke's going nowhere, is it? That business is a global giant.
yeah, I think it's very, like you say, going nowhere. I mean, as with anything, there's lots of restructuring and stuff. So in the modern world, I think everything sort of switches up a bit, doesn't it? But ultimately, it's a pretty safe bet doing that, isn't it?
It is. In which case, talk to me about that conversation when you got back and you were like, look, love, I actually think I might be jacking the job.
Well, as we talked about before, B, my missus, she hates fishing, very sceptical of the whole deal.
I mean, we're going to come back to this because we can't easily brush over a statement like that, but carry on.
Yeah, so I will say I think that conversation was probably easier than what you would think, purely because I think she knows how much... Because I suppose the thing is, she knows that I never wanted to work in fishing. I didn't, I had no interest in working in fishing.
Yep.
Purely because I like to keep what I love to do separate to, what is in my income, what I do for a job. So the fact that I'd said to her when I went down, same as what we talked about, that I couldn't quite in my mind the whole Otter thing. How is this going to work? How is this a job? And the fact that I'd been convinced, I think she more or less trusted that, right, okay, we'll go with him on this.
So you probably left that morning saying, I'm just going to humour him, just hit, I'm going to hear him out. And then you came back selling her the idea that you were going to change your job for this. You were going to be like a one-man band effectively to start with.
Yeah.
Did she understand how much of a time commitment that was going to be in the early days?
No, probably not. I think that the blurring of the lifestyles is particularly in the early days. If I'm going, we'll talk about it, but like the lads that look after the lakes for us, for example, they're there, they're doing it, they're out all weathers in their spare time, putting their commitment into the lakes. So when I go to meet up with them, they become friends, and we'll have a curry at the lake, but ultimately it is also work, because we're chatting about the things we want to do, we're putting a schedule together, I'm getting a feel for the place, but you try passing that off to my wife, that me going for a curry at a fishing
with
lake,
the lads,
is work. But so when I'm like, well, I'm going fishing on Friday, but I've been away for 2 nights at lakes with rods having curries, which ultimately is not my job, by the way, but just making it, selling it.
But hang on a minute, if these lads aren't on board, you need guys on all of the venues that you can trust, right? And if they're not on board, then you haven't got an organisation that runs very well, have you?
The whole thing dies without them.
Yeah.
Although it's Dan's lake, it's my lake, it's the lads in there, it's ultimately it's no more person's lake than the guys that run them for us. That is the bottom line. They're there, they know what's going on, they are putting all these places we take, particularly in the early days, they need a load of work, like a load of work. It's them doing that work, and it's them doing it effectively. I mean, there's some perks and stuff, but ultimately it's unpaid work in their time building that vision.
This is the kind of scene that you probably, this is the commitment you're expecting from the boys, presumably. Yeah,
it's fisheries, isn't it? That's what it is. To make it the lakes we get, it's not one that you walk around, do a little bit of pruning here, a little bit of pruning there, and it's all good. There's generally quite a lot to do, and it's an ongoing thing. So a lot of the boys who run the lakes have been with us, some of them since when I first started. And you think going 7-8 years of weekends, work nights, all at the same place, all for the kind of common good, if you want to give it that. That is a lot. And you, from my point of view, we have to do our end of the bargain. I can't not take that phone call on Sunday afternoon when someone's down there dealing with something because I'm out with my kids.
Yeah.
There's only so many times you can ignore someone like that, and then before they're like, well, what am I? I'm here on a Sunday, and he's not bothering to, take the call.
But that's not going to make it any easier to understand for the missus, is it?
No, at all.
She's still going to hate you taking that phone call.
She, because B is a teacher, so in the teaching world, although as you know, Rich, they do loads of above and beyond.
Ridiculous.
It's every bit as savage as what I do, really. Yep. It really is. But I still think it's that sort of as if I worked in Barclays format of but it's just not. You get these calls.
No, it's a job that, like you pointed out, didn't exist. A job that you thought perhaps couldn't even exist, but it does, and here we are 8 years on. But what I do want to do, Matt, is to really, we're going to talk about embryo in depth. What I do want to do to start with, though, is to figure out, I guess, a little bit about where you come from as a person. Obviously, you've said already that your passion had been kept very separate and private, presumably, and a lot of your fishing is very private, and we're not going to be able to talk about that, which is fine. I totally respect that. Everyone I've spoken to since we decided we were going to do this podcast is like, you're not going to love this, but everyone really respects you as an angler. They're like, he's caught some fish that, which we, unfortunately, you have, and they're going to remain under a veil of no publicity. But we do want to talk about inspirations, Matt. So where did you grow up, and what were the kind of, what were your kind of fledgling carp inspirations, if you like?
So with same as most of the people you interview, I'm sure, certainly of my generation, it all starts very young. For me, I had a river in my garden, had the river Nen in my back garden. So from the age of 5, 6, we were down. It was different era, isn't it? We all had nets, and we'd just go in the slipway and catch stone loaches.
Yeah.
Then I remember the old man coming down. My dad is not an angler.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear, borderline boat rod with a huge float, and he caught this gudgeon, which when you've been catching stone loaches is a
scaled up stone loach, isn't it?
Yeah, mega. Yeah. That's the target. So then you're onto them, then you catch and obviously the whole kind of journey from there kind of morphs into ultimately I went to the Isle of Wight. I've lived on the Isle of Wight for a long time.
Okay.
So that's all sea fishing.
So the carp scene that exists there now wasn't there then?
No. So none of, when I was there, because I went there when I was 11, so I'd already sort of moved to be what was back then called specimen hunting.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Sort of just fishing, tench bream, all that
all
stuff.
On the Nen? Or exploring lakes in that area?
And the gravel pits around there, anywhere I could get to on the bike with my mates effectively. And then you go to the Isle of Wight, and it's back then particularly, it's very, the coarse fishing is very, very sanitized. There's hard, for a 12-year-old with some battered gear, that I think there was, I can't remember what it's called, Hale Manor was a syndicate, I think.
Rookley Park going at that stage, or? So
I fished Rookley Park, and it had a bunch of knackered old kois in it, right. No other fish in there at all, and you could do it in an afternoon, but that was one of the premier. Then Tim came down, and ultimately we went back sort of full circle, ended up netting those fish out and taking them to Norton Disney, the ones that he put in post me being there. But so the thing with the Isle of Wight, it was very limited in terms of interest in coarse fishing, but because of the recession in the 90s, we couldn't sell the house in Northamptonshire.
Okay.
So we had negative equity and everything. So every holiday we'd go up there, and then I'd carry on fishing, and through the formative years, that it just gets into you, doesn't it? I mean, I feel like it's programmed into me. That there's a little bit of that sort of spectrum-y stuff in my family.
Right.
It's difficult to self-diagnose yourself, isn't it? But I'm very. It's an obsessional thing. Ask my wife. When my mum was around, she used to say that to be it's an obsession. It's not good. It's not healthy. It's he's got this crazy thing about fishing. And that ultimately, I think in this country, the kind of pinnacle of it, as far as I'm concerned, is fishing for big carp. You do the other things, and ultimately you can catch what you want to catch to order.
Did you have to leave the Isle of Wight in order to get to that pinnacle?
So when I went to university in Cambridge, not proper Cambridge, in the Anglia Ruskin, the only reason I went there was because I had access to the fishing. So my nan and granddad still lived in Northamptonshire, so I would as soon as the last thing was finished, tutorial or whatever they were called, I would just try and get this rickety old bus, navigate to Northamptonshire, and then spend 4 days mucking around on the river or on the lakes. And you just go through that journey. Then that it's just in you, isn't it? The thing that sort of pushed the whole carp thing, like this is pre the 98 floods. I know they were very big. They moved after the 98 floods. The rivers were full of carp. Pre 98, the only carp that were in that part of the Nen were from Duncan Kay's fishery. I think he'd lost a few over the years to smaller flooding, and you'd see them.
Would that be the site that's now Stanwick, or would that be the site at Ringstead?
So this is Ringstead.
Yeah.
So there were carp in the river, and it was always said that's where they'd come from. So our mission was to catch those, basically. And they're in Woodford backwater and places like that where we used to fish. And I remember hooking one up, and I remember that vividly, like more than anything. You catch all these super beasts in latter year. None of that sits with me the way I can remember this night sitting there with I had no gear.
This was night fishing?
It was evening fishing.
Okay.
So I was still I wasn't at university at this point. I was on one of my trips to my nan and granddad's. So I had no gear. Beach casters on the Isle of Wight, but that's I was borrowing my mate Coles's kit, which is what I used to do, which was this terrible early days rod pod thing. And I remember the whole thing just jumping off, flying off down the backwater and catching the bottom of the handle of the rod, and just watching this thing just power off up the backwater, and all the bulrushes just smash out the way, and just the power of it. I couldn't do anything with it. And it's always romanticised in your mind, isn't it? The sun setting as this thing saw me off down the back of the backwater. And from that point, it was like that is what I want to do, like that. Even now, that sort of fires me up to settle that score of that one.
But you weren't able. Were you able to catch any of those carp?
I was. Well, so while at your college, you've got so much going on in real terms. That I wasn't properly fishing really. I'd come back and fish, but not out and out carp fishing at all. So it was always in my mind, like, to come back. And then it got to the 16th, and up until that point, the previous year, massive grind. There was hardly any carp in the river. There's carp everywhere,
right?
Because the 98 floods had happened that April.
So we're talking like literally almost 25 years ago to the day, aren't we? I think, more or less. Yeah,
the carp everywhere.
As we're recording this. Yeah.
So me and Coles he'd be on one side of the river, backwater. I'd be on the other with a bag of chum mixers each, and you just pour them in, and then these were all gravel pit carp. That flooded out. They were good fish. And it was like you're picking which ones you want to have off the top. They're all just settling these lily beds and stuff. So we did catch river carp and quite a few real nice fish, but whether they were, it was a very different proposition for a short time until they all got relocated.
What part of Northamptonshire are we talking about, Matt, for people who might know the area?
That is sort of a little village, rural Northamptonshire. So Woodford, which is a tiny little place. It is near Wellingborough.
That sort of area.
Yeah, that kind of general area. Yeah, sort of in between there.
I did one night on the Nen with a friend. Would have been about sort of 2006-07, I would guess. Right in Northampton, and I have caught a small river carp. I mean, God knows where it'd come from. This was like £4. I think I had 2 that night actually.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
The bit. There's like a prominent road runs right through the middle. I don't know what it is, Matt, but it's almost like a flyover, and you've got the Delaprey Lake on one side of the river there. It was just there, like.
I was a few in there, yeah.
Is there?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, well, I thought it was some super low stock, that I'd managed to winkle 2 out now. I mean, that famously, there's been lots of carp through that river, hasn't there?
Yeah.
From all those pits, I guess.
Yeah, the less so in recent years because of the predation thing,
Yeah.
but that's right the way down the Nen. It's like a highway, isn't it? All those gravel pits are quite low lying. They've all moved around. A lot of the places I've fished there, it all gets reset, doesn't it, after a big flood event a lot of the time.
And actually, when you sort of think about that area, Matt, it is rich in carp fishing history. Just to mention a Duncan Kay, like Kevin Maddox, Alan Taylor, the people that fished in that area. Who is the Dennis McFetrick?
Yeah.
There's lots of big names of yesteryear of fished Northampton. I mean, I guess it was all centered around the Kevin Maddox kind of, Ringstead, mid Northants type scene.
It's funny. For me, as a kid, if I had money, I was buying hooks. I wasn't buying Carp World because that was all my budget for that week. And also I was very much on Tenchbury Chub, whatever came along. It wasn't. But that kind of, I fished a lot of those gravel pits. They're all on club tickets. They're all on Wellingborough or Kettering, all these places that are £1,000 syndicates or whatever. They were all on those books. Not as kids that we ever bought those books. We just used to fish them anyway.
Yeah,
but,
you had a gold card.
Yeah, we all had the gold card. But but as far as carp fishing went, you would hardly see anyone fishing those pits. Like almost no one.
They would have been super sort of raw, I guess, as well, because the Nen Valley, if we're being kind, some of the lakes are pretty open, Matt, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I imagine back then that was very much that way.
You remember some of them being dug, and they were all the fish weren't massive by modern standards at all, and they're all low stock. They're all just low stock. You weren't catching a lot of fish. You'd see these guys. You bump into them nowadays, actually, old guys now, but like they're tutti frutti boilies sitting there, and when you're a kid, you're super proactive, aren't you? You're out doing stuff. They just sit there.
Right.
sit there and nothing's happening. Like you couldn't get your head around it, could you? But like when they did catch one, it was a bit mind blowing. But all those pits back then were very, very lightly fished.
Do you remember a moment when your carp fishing went up a gear?
I think it was quite a gradual thing. I think until I suppose would be Woolpack, would be that sort of before and after.
Okay.
I targeted individual fish and stuff before that, but that was, you realise when you fished around real people who really had it down that you were going to have to up your game.
How did you notice? What were you seeing, and who were these people?
Like we said, Rob Farron. You see people like that. Like he was, I was fishing on 5-6 and he was on 7, and I can't remember. B had gone. I think she'd gone on a holiday with a friend or something. She was away for a week, which never.
And you were absolutely rubbing your hands.
This never happens. I never get a week's fishing. I don't think I've had one since.
No.
But like I was on 5-6. He was fishing behind me on 7, and that was 7 was back then was a tricky little lake, and he was smashing it to pieces. I think he'd had 50 odd bites, and no one else had caught hardly anything. And because we got chatting, you get behind the magician's curtain as such, you see how he's working.
Why did Rob take you into his confidence, though?
I don't know, to be honest. Just
because obviously you're good friends now.
Yeah.
But this is a guy who's a step ahead of you and is happy to tell you about why he is.
Well, he was catching an insane amount of fish just behind me, so I was on photographer duty all week.
Okay. So he needed you.
Yeah, he actually caught Fred that's still in there today. He caught that, and I remember him catching that fish. I'd just been round, we'd had a cup of tea, and I was just going to come back to my swim, and he was like, I won't go just yet, the left-hander's about to go. And I was like, right-o. And then I've come back round, and I can see him playing a fish on his left-hand rod, and it was that Fred.
How did he know?
I don't know. In all honesty, like he had
Matt, you're a rational guy.
Yeah.
He's not a magician. He's a carp angler. How did he know what was going? Had he seen him? Was he able to watch the fish in that area?
No.
Right.
No, he was fishing to a little clay hump out
Intuition?
to the right.
Or
Yeah, I think he'd
signs?
obviously probably
Yeah.
had them at that time through the morning. You know, it was all probably happening on that rod. He knew he was going to have another one, but
But it looked to your eyes, this
to
was
the
like,
untrained eye, yeah, that. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't that green at this point,
Yeah.
but it's just that thing of that's when you realise, and fishing all them kind of with those people, like you said,
Yeah.
Webby and my mate Ed as well, who's another very, very solid angler. Like when you get to know these people well and you see what all the work, as always, all the actual work that's going in behind the scenes
Yeah.
to lead up to the captures, that's when you realise that a couple of walks around in the week and a little bit of it's not cutting it. Like if you want to get it done, you've got to basically make it happen.
So they were the things that you would have absorbed from Rob over the longer term.
Yeah.
What could you absorb, let's say, on that trip when he absolutely hammered him? Like what you were presumably like trying to watch what he's up to.
It's things like a lot of this stuff now is all it's taken for granted by people who are quite new to it almost, because it's just there's so much information, isn't there? But like he was fishing on the back of the clay in the firm silt on the bloodworm that he'd found. He knew that was a bloodworm, but he'd baited it for a long time. The precision, with the reel turns and everything else that he was doing back then, again, fishing on the
pre-wraps, obviously. So
pre-wraps, there was a level of precision to the whole thing, a level of it was just tidy. Like that, the whole thing was a lot tidier. That I think he probably had the Gravitron on at the time, the braid and everything else. It was just fishing much tidier than everyone else.
Okay.
And that understanding of what's going on underneath, in terms of at that point they were migrating down into the silt, deeper in water, get harvesting, all that. Again, it's very standard these days, but back then not so much. Like people would still be fishing the gravel humps and all this sort of stuff.
I don't know if it is standard, Matt. I think maybe in amongst a certain percentage of people who understand lakes, but for the rest of us who are trying to find our way, very often you're fishing the more obvious stuff.
Yeah, he was he'll sit down and show the difference between the worked clay and the clay that hadn't been worked. And
Rob would,
just
on his lead.
Yeah, and just things like that.
How do you tell?
Well, like on there, for example, like the bottom was quite, as it often is in those old tree line pits, very black and everything else. It would come back grey and tainted, and then you'd get the fresh brownish stuff from underneath where they'd sort of worked it out. So you can see when you're getting lumps of that on the lead.
So one thing it's always intrigued me about clay, and you're a good person to ask, I think. I'm not going to ask you about whether they get minerals through it. That's not. This is clay is obviously something they find super attractive or very useful. Does it always denote an area they're feeding though? Because they're rubbing on it, presumably maybe to get rid of part of parasite.
Yeah. I think that especially these days, you're fishing near them. I think if you're fishing next, particularly on an oversized clay hump and stuff, they're going to visit and they're going to clean them, getting bites off it. Because if you went back to that kind of era, there would only be a percentage of people, especially if it's at range and stuff, there'd only be a percentage of people who are able to set stuff up properly on there. Like nowadays, everyone's fishing out to that clay hump. And at that point there's a level of danger, so they'll go and clean themselves on it, but are they going to feed there? Possibly not. If they've been clumped off it year in, year out, then it becomes just a cleaning spot, and I don't think it naturally always leads to
no, because I would imagine, Matt, that I'd imagine that it's quite it's densely structured. There's nowhere for invertebrates to actually get into the bottom there, is there? So what could they even eat off clay?
I think so. With those kind of wall pack pits, you're looking. It's all about the feel of when those spots have been worked and the timing of getting in to harvest them, before it blows, basically. So you do get a lot of those areas work down to that clay quite quick. So as soon as if you're fishing on the edge of the silkweed in a nice sort of firm bit and suddenly you start getting clay where you weren't before, you need to get in there like
now, because it's almost finished.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've a very small window at that point.
Talk to me about the character of these pits. Woolpack will be familiar to many people now because there's been quite a lot of written on it over the years, an awful lot filmed on it in recent times. Some of the old fish that you fished for are still alive.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how you came to fish what has been actually very pivotal in that area, that lake, hasn't it? In terms of stock and in terms of, I suppose, like I say, in more recent times, publicity.
Yeah, I think because I'm really local to it.
Yeah.
So I still, to this day, Rob actually runs the other side of the Woolpack, which is publicity ban, and I walk my dogs around there still quite regularly.
Yeah.
And do a little bit in the winter or whatever. It's 10 minutes, before the bypass, it's probably 5 minutes from my front door.
Yep.
So that I think in 2000 I went for my first walk around there. Back in those days, it used to be a green card and a gold card. Gold card would cover the whole site. Green card, effectively what's Rob's side now. And the green card was day ticket. So I was fishing elsewhere, but I would go up. I'd do the odd sort of session on the green side on day ticket, and I'd seen a picture that would have been about 2004, 2005, I suppose. I saw a picture of paddle, which was a big common. That was knocking around at sort of mid 40s at the time. I was, on that sort of big fish thing, so I got myself a ticket on there, and I think that was 250 quid for all of the lakes on the site back then.
Wow.
Yeah.
Value. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, back then it was
Probably still. Yeah.
Yeah, it was good value for what you were getting. There's a lot of lakes on that site and a lot of good fishing.
Tell us a little bit about the character of those lakes, Matt, and also about their historical significance.
They're all quite deep, steep margined lakes. These days, particularly all tree lined. Even when I was there, they're quite mature pits, quite matured quite fast. Those little lakes. They're all generally sort of tap clear, weedy, very intimate. Sort of tricky little pits. They're all, I think the biggest one probably 5-6, which is sub 10 acres, 8-9 acres, isn't it? I think they're all right round the site. All of those pits are in that vein, and then I suppose significance wise
got quite a good aerial shot that gives you an idea of.
Okay,
5-6,
yeah. That's part of it there. So
I mean, 5-6 is like two lakes. Well, presumably that when were they even cut through, Matt? Do you know?
I presume at the point when it was all put together. I mean, you've got there's the two channels, top and bottom, and then there was a, I don't know if it's still there. Well, there was the middle one, and then there was a little sort of covert one just off of the bottom. So there's that was quite a good little area.
For the purposes of those listening, Matt, could you describe what that looks like? Those lakes there, what we're actually seeing?
Yeah. So the Pit 6 is almost like a little canal, really. It's very deep, even in those days, very sort of thick black silt, quite dead a lot of the time, really. And then 5 is more of a sort of open water, sort of standard-ish fishing lake. So you've got a big island between the two with various little sort of crossing points between both sides of the lake.
How significant did those crossing points end up being? Like, which one did the fish just use certain ones, or would they use them all?
They would use them all. The things like that little crossing point up from the bottom, heavily rush lined, you wouldn't actually know that they could get through there. So
right.
Fishing just to the side of that, there was a little hump there that did quite a few fish. It's a funny little pit, really, because they weren't in 6 that much.
Right, 6 is the left-hand one here.
Yeah, So 6 is the canal, essentially. Yeah. So they weren't, and if they were in there, getting set in there was awkward, because again, it's all that style of fishing, for me anyway, was all very much precision based. A lot of sort of.
So actually, multiple casts to get the drop.
Certainly the way I fished it, and the way I learned to fish all of that style, and my small pit fishing in general, is you're setting it up for the next morning.
Yeah.
So it's all about those little dinner plate spots that if you have to take 38 casts to get it exactly the way you want it, then you do.
And before we move back to the first part of that question, Matt, why were these spots important to you? How did you find them, and how did you know that they were going to be important spots?
I think it would be a question of, I would watch where they're naturally, the dream ticket really was watching where they were happy to feed. Then once that period's passed, letting it down, finding what they're feeding on, essentially, normally harder bits in the silt, whatever it is, in the spring, sort of the shrimp rich bits of silkweed on the back of a bar, whatever it is, the thing that's bringing them in, generally harder spots, but not always. And then you would start a little process of baiting that, little bits and pieces.
Why is baiting important, given that they're coming in for food in the first place?
I think it just conditions them. It takes it from certainly on my time scale when I'm fishing, I haven't got the luxury of sitting there all weekend. I want them to be there for when I'm turning up. At some point within that, whatever it is, 12 hours that I'm at the lake, they need to turn up.
So you want to intensify what they're doing on those spots. Like, they're not browsing, they're coming in because they know there's food there, and they're coming in regularly.
Yeah, I think it's you can convert, in my experience, you can convert from a natural feeding spot to somewhere that you're going to be able to catch have it off, basically, if you're precise enough to be right on where they're naturally feeding. And then the dream ticket is to, on somewhere like that, which is, even back then, was very busy, you don't get 2-3 weeks of work before you can slide in. The window is much shorter than that, but the longer you can stretch that out for, without blowing the spot completely out wide, it's almost a guarantee at that point.
So you find a spot that they're interested in. What are you initially applying to that spot? How does that crescendo, that baiting period, until you like slide into the spot?
So somewhere like that, you're always trying to game it, really, because again, if you let that play out over weeks as opposed to days, people will see it. They're very showy, those fish, and the more confident they get, the more showy they're going to be. So I used casters a lot back then. Loads of casters
early on the caster game.
It was very we caught a lot of those fish on casters,
right?
And that would just completely kickstart it. So you've got a natural area where they're happy to feed, then you're loading that up as precise as you can with casters.
Quantities or not?
Less than maggots.
Right.
You could get away. The financial constraints, unless you're, even they've never been cheap, and doing it on a scale where I'm not sure there's any great benefit to going crazy with it. But if I could afford as many as I could afford, really, and you're playing that out again as long as you can. Now, I found on there, and I found it loads of places. It's maybe a bit different now because everyone's onto it. Like it's a thing now, isn't it? Worms and casters and all that. But back then, they couldn't, like, if you're fishing one of those shallow island spots and stuff, when they came over the top, they couldn't
resist.
Now, you're not going to, then they might drop straight away.
Yep.
They are not going through till 11 o'clock in the morning the next day without coming and finishing that. So you'd see them in the summer cruising along, they'd be out along the island and everything. If you're set sweet out there and you've got it all the way you want it and there's casters involved, I just need to see them to come somewhere over that spot.
You're that confident?
Yeah, but 100% back then, they would drop. By the next morning, they would drop at some point.
When I look at a caster, if we've got one here in front of us, for instance, it's a fairly inert looking thing. I can't imagine it's pumping out signals, Matt. What's going on when they see these things? Or how are they picking it up?
I think they're tuned in to natural food on any of those. Like anything that's not got a hook attached to it potentially there's a lot of competition to eat it effectively, be it a snail, a shrimp, whatever it is, bloodworm. They know, they're fished for around the clock.
Yep.
They know what a baiting situation looks like. So whenever I think, and nowadays I'd include casters in this and all these other bits, they know when they drop to feed on that, there's an element of risk with it. It's not any great intelligence. It's just that instinct thing. They've seen it 100 times before. If you can put something down there, especially back then, like casters, which mimics what they're also harvesting most of the rest of the time, be it, I don't know, shrimps, whatever it is, basically something that they don't regularly get caught on, I think they'll just come in and smash it the same way as if it was a bloodworm bed. And obviously I don't know how much signal they give out. For me on there, it's a visual thing. Like if they swam over it, they've obviously got a lot going on.
Yes, that we don't understand.
Yeah, clearly. But as long as they saw it, like it was going at some point. They wouldn't just leave them.
I feel like I've got Dan in one ear saying, how did he present it? Like, what were you doing? Were you using casters on the hair, on the hook?
So I used to use the Magaliner a lot.
Yeah.
Just maggot, two white maggots, and then the stiff Enterprise rubber maggots, not the like they had a rubbery caster one which didn't have any bend to it. To be honest, you'd catch them on any old thing when you got them right on it. I did have a little sort of setup that I used back then with a sort of critically balanced off little 10 miller.
Okay.
And that was quite handy at times as well. But yeah, either way, really.
So in a way, you weren't actually trying to be different with the casters. You actually just felt that was the best bait that you could give them.
I think when you're fishing, there was a lot of you might be fishing across to something, and then you've got the luxury of fishing to the float. You back it, right in tight, and then you can come around and bait by handle with a catapult. So if you're getting it smack over the top, and again with the casters, you've got the luxury. We talked about all these money spots and everything else. With the cast, especially back then, you could take some liberties. You could fish on the edge of that gravel, on that sort of bigger gravel area where you would normally be, nothing's going down.
Okay.
Well, there, it's right on the shelf. They're swimming over it all day long. I'm just going to, fish this tight on there. And as long as I'm fishing in the middle of that lot, it's going.
Yeah, which is presumably then the critical bit, because you're paying a lot of money.
Yeah.
You've got your one night a week or whatever. Those casters need to land within, or more critically, your rig needs to land in amongst them.
Yeah.
It had to be that precise.
Yeah.
How did you work out? How did you sort of get into the routine that were you like shaving the side of the float with the lead? Like, how did you ensure that you were in amongst it all?
A lot of it's feel. I've got a sort of an exaggerated swing back.
Yeah.
So I sort of. I remember Webby actually being on one of those gaps when I've cast.
This is Steve Webb.
Yeah. So like he actually watched it land on my spot, so it's gone in well beyond.
Yeah.
Like probably, I don't know, let's say a rod length,
Yeah.
probably not quite that far, but it just flies back through the water and then drops in.
Because you're sweeping the rod back.
Yeah, I do it less now, but certainly back it's something, I don't know why, just habit wise. So I'd stop it dead, and I've always factored that in. Going quite a bit beyond the float, and you sort of. The aim is to sort of stop it dead almost on the surface, and obviously to the clip or whatever, but feather in it. So I'm trying to take the momentum out as much as I can, and then swing it back in, and then just lower it. Obviously, that the further you go, the trickier that becomes. But that's how I do it. Sort of an exaggerate. Once it's hit the water and stopped, it's sort of an exaggerated swing back.
Because you're just going to straighten the link as you draw it back, and then hopefully it's all going to go down.
Yeah, so you kind of just swing it right back, and then it either hits the bottom in shallow water, or if it's a little bit deeper, you're just dropping it in. But again, with the fishing on there, it was all to the float. This is, you're doing it to real turns.
Yes.
But you're also, because you're fishing for one bite, a lot of the time.
So actually, you're cracking the float out at the start of every session, just to make sure that you're.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that now.
No, but we'd have you wrapped.
Back then, it's that double insurance, and certainly in the autumn and stuff like that, the spots were really small. So even though you're all clipped up or whatever else, you need that insurance to know that. I always felt on there anyway, like inches matter. If it's half a foot off.
So did you habitually pop the float at the side of the spot, Matt, or were you put it in the middle and then work it? You're using that as a reference point, but where were you positioning the float in order to make sure you were on the right spot?
It would be almost in the middle.
Yeah.
And then you've just got to go that, which is why it takes. You're not doing it in one probably, because you're obviously going beyond and swinging in, but you're going really tight, like as tight as you possibly can. Like there's none of this like half a foot to the side nonsense. It had to be
shaving the float,
taking
the paint off.
Well, it's landing beyond, but then swinging back, and it's right.
How many times do you reel the rig in with the marker? Yeah. You seem like quite a calm guy, but obviously fishing in that style is incredibly. It takes a bit of patience, right? And it demands patience, surely.
It does.
Because I'm fried, mate. After if I can't if I'm 10 casts in, I'm starting to blow up.
I think there's the two ends of the spectrum, isn't there? You've got that style of fishing, which is very, very technical. There's a lot of all right down to the rigs you use, and they're all delicate. Everything's you're not smacking that 130 yards. It's all
Right.
it's tailor made for what you're doing there and the precision that goes with it.
I mean, you'd hand place these if you could, wouldn't you? But you
For
can't,
sure.
so you're having to.
You're doing the next best
Yeah.
thing, aren't you? And that it is annoying, and you get those you get those sessions where the wind's up, whatever. It doesn't go the way you're always happy enough, and you keep going until you either run out of light or you're happy enough. But I find it probably these days on the bigger pit, because you're pushing it. You'll invariably end up going to the limit of what you can do, and then if you have some kind of a disaster on there, that is because
it's multiplied, right? It's everything.
Yeah, you're having to. If you reel a rod in at 130 yards on dusk, what are you even doing there at that point? Like you've put all this effort in, you've got it set, you've trying to get it done on the overnighter, and that is super frustrating.
Okay.
And there's no calmness there at all when that goes down.
Looking back at that period, you fished in an incredibly refined manner. I would imagine that most people, and yourself included, probably don't need to fish like that for the rest, for maybe 2/3 of the rest of your time that you've spent angling. Or do you take that incredibly spotty way of fishing and apply it everywhere?
To a degree,
Yeah.
you do, yeah. I think I'm sure most people do this, but I always envisage exactly what I think's happening under the surface, I try and picture it in my mind. So the more you can do with the less, live fishing, you don't want to be doing this live fishing if you can avoid it. Like in terms of when you're turning up to fish, you don't want to be smashing the hell out of it with the lead. But so it's all done in advance where possible. Not always possible, is it, these days? So I suppose there's a little bit of compromise there. But even fishing large open pits and stuff, there's an element of that approach. I think that in my mind, if you've got it set right on a decent spot, if you were to scuba dive it and go out and it's all sitting on a spot the size of this table, and it's lying over the back, and your rig's here, and it's sitting proud, and it's all tidy, I think it's amazing how often that goes.
Right. But the rest of the time, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Within reason.
Within reason.
Yeah.
You see it. Going back to those Woolpack, you see it a lot. Like they're in and on you all the time, the time, and they're just sorting you out. Like they know.
I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about presentations, because I've seen you chuck out something quite interesting that you probably don't even remember that I was there for. But we'll talk about that in a bit. I do want to bring us back, because we want to talk a bit more about. I did ask you initially about the. Aside from the character of the Woolpack pits, the significance of those pits, and describe the fish to us as well, because we've got some examples and we're gonna show a few from that era. But why were they special, and where did they come from?
So, the initial Woolpack ones, they were Chillingworth fish. Bill Chillingworth stocked those. So, from various sources, I'm not 100% sure where he got them. So they were quite. I think there was there's people who know more than me, but I think there was 2 batches of those. The original batch of those fish, I know had paddle, cluster, the long common, carving, and a lot of those.
I think, Tobes, have we got carving, Matt?
Carving
pop up.
Carving will be on there somewhere.
Yeah,
long common is in there.
Long common on carve it. So
That's the carving.
yeah, look at that, mate. I mean, he's still about, yeah.
Yeah, he's still going strong. Yeah.
It looks very much the same still.
It does, yeah. It's pretty much exactly the
So
same.
what
these
makes
days.
that a Chillingworth fish like to you? Like what are the things we're looking at there?
I think you look at the tail. It's got that little heart-shaped tail.
Yeah.
Obviously, the colour of it, the sort of roundedness of the head.
Do you think that's a glass carp? Looking at it there.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll come up. Maybe we'll explain a bit about that in a bit. But for those people who don't know what glass carp are, but it's the very, again, for those listening, it's an incredibly dark fish, Matt, isn't it? With a beautiful rounded tail and quite a snubby head and sunken eye.
Yeah.
You'd say.
Yeah, you can see it, and you look at the Pit 4, for example. That's got the same eye
head
going
as
on.
well,
Yeah, exactly the same bolt on head, hasn't it? They're all quite
Look
similar.
at the peck as well.
Yeah.
Very thickened front ray there, is it? And then a little notchy peck.
Yeah, the other side's even smaller. They tend to have, even when they were younger, like little fins. They've just got that certain look to them. the other fish in there, the sort of a lot of the scalier ones actually, they're from the other side. They came from, I can't remember if they're Holland or Belgium, but they were brought across by the owners of the other side
Right.
in the early 80s.
And did they go into the side that you're talking about as well?
So I believe they went primarily into 3 and 2, and then they flooded out in 98.
Yep.
And they went in the rivers, they went in the reserves, they went in all up and down the valley. I presume some went south, and they were,
Lost.
some were moved back into sight from those places.
What would be a good example of those fish that we might have, Toby might be able to pop
So I would say just like the friendly linears, one of those.
Yep.
The big, there's a bigger sort of fully scaled on there, Tobe, like the original Woolpack fully. That's a cool fish. That's one of very much one of those.
These. Do you think there's a chance?
That one there?
Yeah, that one there.
Do you think there's a chance that these are what we might call, for want of a better term, Galicians? Like from the they're not. I'm going to try and pronounce it. They're not the Nederlander Heidmatschkapi fish, are they?
I've always.
That was impressive.
I can't, it's rubbish, mate.
Yeah,
we need someone who's
pretty
actually
decent,
Dutch in here.
It sounded very fluent, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're. I've always thought they were Galicians. You know,
Yes.
I'm no sort of aficionado.
Because obviously Holland isn't Galicia, is
No.
it? But it does have these strong links with the Polish, these Polish carp, effectively, right?
Yeah,
And this could be where these fish are from.
yeah, I believe so. I can't remember. I think it was Holland that they came from, but the ones all round the site have that look of those ones, particularly those. There's a lot of, well, there certainly was back then, a lot of front heavy, sort of heavily scaled linear style fish. So right up around the gill plate, you often get that heavy sort of scaling up there, and then a bit of randomness behind.
I mean, were you interested in the history of these fish at the time? I mean, having just seen the carving there, which is an incredible fish, were you aware of just how special that was? Because you said you were never into the scene as such. Did you understand though still that these were special fish?
I remember I remember this quite clearly, sitting there one night. You used to get good nights down there where it would be, if they were in that canal side in 6 in the autumn, you know, it'd be 10 o'clock at night, flat calm. You know, stars are out, moon's out, obviously. And then you'd hear one just boom out, and all the ripples would come into the canal, and like electric. And I remember there used to be a lot of nights where you'd be sitting with 2 or 3 people chatting rubbish, basically. And one of the conscious things back then was like, because the whole thing was changing, you know, 40 pounders, even 50 pounders were becoming more accessible, in as much as there was a lot more of them. You could see the change to where we are now, where you know there's loads of 40s and 50 pounders. I kind of grew up fishing Nem Valley pits, places like that, for fish that look broadly similar to those, and I think you could say I was a bit of a carp puritan, really, but it's only because I wanted to fish for ones that I grew up fishing for as such.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, you know, most of us inherit that preference because of what we've seen, not because of what we've caught. Whereas for you, you wanted to repeat, in a way, the things you enjoyed about your fishing, which is catching scaly carp, presumably, or carp of a certain type.
Yeah, you did realise when you were catching those, you were. I've caught most of the scaly ones on that site, and you end up like stamp collecting, really. You're like, oh, I'll go and fish for that one there and fish for that one there. So it becomes a bit of a thing, and then I think nowadays that you see that promoted a lot online, don't you? That whole thing of scaly bangers, dare I say it, that thing. But because I fished there and a couple of other places quite similar, I don't know. I decided quite early on that that's what I wanted to fish for. But again, like you say, it wasn't for, you know, I don't really. It wasn't
because you'd seen someone holding one. It was
no, because it wasn't a thing as much. I don't think back then. I don't remember it being much of a thing. It was so like that fully, for example. there was a few £30 fullies in there. There's still a couple of them left now, and there weren't loads of them around then. They're 10 a penny now, aren't they? Like £30 fully scaled. There's newish ones, but loads and loads and loads of them. Back then, I couldn't think of loads of places where you could go and catch mid £30.
It's a very. I mean, did you catch Spit 4? No.
So
do we have a picture of another fully from there, Matt?
yeah, if you any of them strawberry ones, the small fully on there, Tobes. There's quite a few sort of.
But like you say, that they were very much like your fantasy carp, weren't they? A big, fully scaled.
Yeah. So that
didn't really exist. Like I think people would draw them and stuff, and like you'd see them in illustrations and that. But I'm not sure there were that many that actually.
Was sort of heavily plated ones. I mean, you had the Summerlees one, didn't you, and a couple of others. But I remember like that one there at the time that there weren't.
That's the strawberry.
Yeah, there weren't loads of fish knocking around like that back then. So.
And is this a Chillingworth fish, you think, or
I think that's
the others?
Yeah, I think that's one of the others.
Yeah.
Okay. Interestingly, there were a few like that one. I think even pre my time, real sort of interesting round, heavily scaled ones. So it might have been from a different Chillingworth.
Looks a bit prehistoric, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a cool fish.
Do you know what's interesting to me about these pictures is, Matt, that you've barely aged a day somehow in that time?
I don't know, bitch. The hair's changed. I know that.
Well, you've lost a bit of weight from that picture anyway.
You do still look about 25.
Vegetarian.
Yeah. Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah. So
okay. How long have you been veggie?
I did a year the other year, and then I fell off the wagon for the Euros, beer and barbecues.
What about the World Cup this year? You're going to see it through on the...
No, mate, I'm not going back. I've done since September.
Fair play.
Primarily for health reasons.
Of course, yeah.
What do you... this is what I like to ask vegetarians. What do you miss the most?
Do you know what? At this stage of the game, I can... everyone says bacon sandwich.
That's always the one,
cliche, though, isn't it? You're going to come up with something different, Matt.
I'd say barbecue... Barbecues are hard. You can't have a good vegetarian barbecue.
No, it's just
and you end up eating
only so much grilled halloumi you can have.
I was going to say, Tobe, if halloumi didn't exist, vegetarianism would look pretty bleak, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, to be fair. But is it barbecues then this time of year?
Barbecues. You're having a couple of beers and you can smell the burgers, and there you are. Like,
you're making me hungry. I haven't had lunch yet.
Some vegetarian kebab. It's just not
Tobes, I think what we should do is order something in just and then eat it in front of Matt.
Should we get like a nice Nando's or something? Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Well, without going too off topic, the whole point of that was like there's a lot of sort of Alzheimer's and dementia anyway in my family, and I think that it's trying to sort out the cholesterol. But the problem with being a vegetarian is most places, because it's not. The ethical thing's good, but it is primarily so I don't lose my marbles at 59.
Right.
But you just end up eating loads of cheese.
Do you take any supplements as well? No.
I just eat lots of nuts.
Right.
Which again is
selenium, stuff like that. That's quite a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
No, interesting. I mean, the health benefits are like.
It's you have to work hard to stay.
What do you eat on the bank then? If you're.
That's a good question, that actually.
What do I eat on the bank?
Can you remember the last time you went fishing? To be fair, I might not.
Yeah, no, I do. Well, I try and eat before I get, because I don't take much food if I'm going fishing. Like I tell you what I eat.
On purpose, or because you're not organised?
I do like travelling light, and I'm badly organised, so it's a killer combo. Yeah. I have like a little pesto pasta thing from the M&S garage. Grab myself a coffee, one of them, and then like there's a samosa thing they do, like a vegetable samosa.
Yeah.
Most places nowadays are quite hard.
I mean, to be fair, M&S garages, if you're a carp angler like me who often hasn't prepared, sort of without those, I don't know what I'd do, because they're reasonably healthy, or can be, if you choose the right stuff. But
Matt, would you ever go as far as going vegan?
I was going to ask that, Toby.
Was
I don't.
But why not though?
Eggs, because I eat. That's in answer to your question. I eat a lot of eggs.
Yeah.
So like, if you were to take eggs out and milk, then I think
that's cheese as well, isn't it? Is that right, or have I got that wrong?
Yeah, no, and cheese, obviously.
Yeah.
Because
you can't even have honey. I was speaking to Gaz Ferrin about this recently. He's
vegan.
He's recently trying. Him and his wife are. I think they've just trying the vegan thing. He's been veggie for years.
Yeah. I knew he was veg.
But he was like, you can't. In theory, you can't have honey, and he has honey in his tea and stuff. So
it's a pretty hard line, isn't it? Like I get it, but like if you're. I am no expert, but like if you're eating eggs, I don't see the problem from eating like free range eggs, particularly from an ethical point of view.
Yeah.
And I don't know where, if you're not going to eat those, like for me, that's where I get my sort of.
What about
protein.
stuff like, I know that the thing that Gaz was going to miss was the prawns, because obviously it's a good bankside stuff that you can do quite a lot with them, and that's good snacking food, plenty of protein, etc. So
I won't eat prawns.
Right.
I like prawns, but I won't eat them purely because I saw a program. I don't know if you made bait with a pre-digested fish meal.
I made bait.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever made bait. Like,
no.
So I went for
obviously I'm aware of those products.
Yeah, so like I can't remember what it's called, Cespro or whatever it is, which is essentially pre-digested fish meal. Is this stuff where they have these big paddy fields full of prawns. Yeah.
Right.
So then they go to the coral reef or whatever
Yeah.
the reef is off these beautiful
Yeah.
islands, get this, I'm not going to swear, rather large net, and then drag it along the bottom.
I'm seeing that. Yeah.
Take everything from octopuses to everything else, grind it all up,
Yeah.
and then that's your pre-digested fish meal, which is prawn food.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I mean, in a way, that's better than what it could be with prawns, because they are one of these mollusks that's a bioaccumulator, aren't they? So any of the heavy metals in the environment, that kind of, any of the real bad shit, they will accumulate in their flesh, won't they? So,
Oh yeah, it's not from a that. Whereas most of my eating is not this ethical thing, from a point of view of rape in the sea.
how is that not illegal already?
Man, I watched that program. I was like, I can't justify eating these, like, because as someone who spent a lot of time sea fishing for absolutely naffle because it's all been chewed up by a boat, I can't sit there and eat this stuff that's doing exactly the same to these tropical reefs and stuff. Even putting it in bait, like, it's a bit of a thing. Like, this is, I know what this is. It's just like sort of cool ecosystem that's just been literally chewed
I mean, these
up.
things must be on the agenda for the, for reform, because that's the way everything's going, and rightly so.
Have you seen that Seaspiracy on Netflix?
No, I've not seen that one. No.
Oh yeah, you watch that and then you will really steer clear of seafood after that.
It's all just depressing, isn't it? Really?
Oh, it
But
was
it's-
totally just like you said, Rich. I couldn't believe half of it was allowed, and even what isn't allowed, a lot of the countries are still breaking laws anyway. And
Yeah.
continuing with it, which is it's baffling. But like you said, it's just we're just totally obliterating an entire, like you said, ecosystem that can't even see, and it's not going to be there much longer.
It's that thing with the whole vegetarian thing. Like, when you've got kids, I say I'm not going to pretend it's like some big. If there hadn't been health benefits, I probably wouldn't be doing it. But when you are doing it, after a while, you think, it's not a bad thing for the kids and stuff.
What's your favourite veggie meal then?
I would say there's bolognese, but with chestnut mushrooms. Just all you. There's a way you like mince them all up, and then you put loads of soy sauce and Worcestershire sauce and all this. You're passing it off as semi. That's decent.
Do you know what? My mum used to make a really good chickpea curry.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
cool,
that's definitely
Totally with that,
time.
Tobe.
Yeah.
Like we sometimes have like cauliflower and chickpea curry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
Actually really
nice.
like that. And, we sort of eat I don't know, maybe like 5 out of 7 days with because my wife plans a lot of the meals, and I tend to do the shopping, she does the planning, and quite a lot of our sweet potato curries, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's nice.
We might have meat once or twice a week, but I'm not, I've no plans to go veggie.
No, I still like a good booner at the end of the day as well.
I had Nando's. I stayed over in Essex last night. I had Nando's on my own, table for one, which is always a bit awkward, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a
Table
bold
for
move.
one. It just seems like the most like cliche thing.
Elliot didn't join you, no?
He was feeding the kids and stuff. So,
Got you.
That's a strong move.
but I ordered. They've got this new thing at Nando's, like this churrasco heat. It's turns out it's in the hot end of it. I could barely eat it. I used to be able to eat hot food. It's gone. It ruined it. I had to leave.
Really?
Yeah, mate. Not good. I'm a medium kind of guy now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Nando. L's extra hot.
I'm all about the extra hot.
Fucking
yeah.
hell, mate.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm hot, and that's my limit. Nando's
Extra
hot is my
hot.
absolute
Yeah.
limit.
When you're vegetarian, you don't enjoy food. You just got
It just all tastes the same anyway.
yeah, you got to
doesn't
pile a
it?
load of hot
Yeah.
sauce on it. You know.
I suppose. On the don't I imagine you made your own bait, Matt?
I did, yeah.
And do still?
No.
Okay. Why?
At the time, the the whatever they call it, the L030, whatever was getting harder to get.
Yeah.
And that was part of the stuff I was using. So I thought, right, I'll do my own. So I do prefer not to be like some bait expert, but I did spend quite a lot of time putting together a couple of things.
Were these along conventional lines? Were these recipes that was this sort of parallel to recipes that you'd seen and that we would all be perhaps?
If you get into it, there's particularly with fish meals, I wouldn't attempt anything else particularly, but like it's all quite using what's out there and trying to put it. You sort of balancing the thing between sort of solubility and everything else, and it's a little bit like a puzzle, cramming this in and cramming that in. And I did put a couple of bits in. I was getting some stuff imported from Canada and stuff like that. That it was good. Yeah, it did give you a lot of confidence. I used to set the breakdown on depending on water temperature and time of year and the amount of invert to break down.
Yeah, most of us should be using very soluble boilies, shouldn't we? If we have little time, surely the point is that you want it breaking down very, very fast and releasing the attractors very fast.
You're trying to, my little, not always achievable by any stretch, but my little thing in my mind was that I want it actively almost going to mush by 11 o'clock the next morning. So like effectively I'm fishing over.
So were you able to boil that at all to get that to happen?
Oh, it was such a faff, really. I used to use a lot of squid. I'd sort of liquidize down squid as a binder because I can't remember now. Is it the trypsin in eggs makes it non-digestible if you don't boil it? So you don't want a load of egg in there if you're going to have reduced boil times because they can't digest it in the same way.
I think off the top of my head, having listened to a few bait podcasts, is it in fact something in eggs that inhibits trypsin?
That's right.
In the carp's stomach.
That's it. Yeah. It's been a while. So you're
I had to scratch back to the back there somewhere. I've never made my own bait, but
So I can't remember. I used to use like a lot of liquidized squid
instead of egg.
Yep. Taking the ink sac axe out, absolute nightmare.
You were filleting squid in the garage.
Filleting squid.
And your missus hates fishing,
mate. This is why she hates fishing. So like the whole thing was a palaver, but you did get good quality bait off the back of it. Like I caught some fish on it. I
can imagine.
In the edge, and But is it any better? It's certainly not better enough. I mean, it's not. There's not enough of an improvement to warrant the hours in the garage for someone like me who gets no hours anyway.
Yeah,
like that's what people end up doing, spending all their time
rolling.
Just making it and not actually using it.
Did you ever actually roll bait, or do you chop in it, or
no? Rob had his own bait thing going, so I used to get him to roll some for me at the time, or I had a little. Again, 10 millers and like make it even more enjoyable. So I used to have to just roll.
It's been painful to put those in, Matt.
The whole
after
thing
the effort that you've gone to, you then just stick them in the lake and may or may not even catch over them. So. It used
to work out something crazy. It was not cheap.
Yes.
Like this was 10, 15 quid a kilo.
Yeah.
And yes, it's good. But like if you go there and there's a couple of stockies in the edge, you ain't feeding them.
No,
you just got to, like that. It's not worth it.
Yes,
like, it literally is like you.
So maybe a lot of your fishing actually is centered around like you just said. Then you're not going to waste anything. So you're ready to detonate every trip potentially. You've got the spot is either rocking or you're preparing the next thing to be rocking before you fish, right? Otherwise you don't throwing nights away, Matt. Surely.
No. Dead time is what I always say. Like you say about that's what you notice with them good anglers. They're rotating stuff, so they're finishing off on one. There's already two in play, which other people don't know that are just getting to the point where they're gonna. So they go from one. That's what you watch Farrant work. That's how he used to work. He'd have 2 or 3 areas going. As one finished, he'd be into the next. So he's just constantly smashing them up. So the thing is, if you're fishing relatively tough lakes and you don't have much time. I cannot sit there with nothing happening. I can't drive to the lake without something, without a sighting, without. I know when I go through that gate more often than not. Spring's a bit different. Spring's same as everyone else. You're on it, aren't you? You've been in the week. If you've not seen them in the week, but they move so quick. But summer and autumn in particular, like as I get to that, I know where I'm going. I know where I want to be going anyway, because I've either seen it through the week. It's somewhere I've got stuff building towards that capture, And then if it doesn't happen, you've still got, until first light, you've still got that sense of anticipation that it could happen because you've done the work,
Yep.
you know the spot's good, you've seen them in there, it should happen. If you're just turning up like on those kind of places with nothing to go, I'm doing a bit of that at the moment for one reason or another. I don't even feel like I'm fishing. I don't feel like I've fished for the last 2-3 months because I've not been able to sort of get anything in process, and I've not been able to be there regularly enough at first light to feel like I'm in the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think we need to. It's fascinating to address this because a lot of the media that we see, and I'm guilty of perpetuating it myself, is largely, it can be showcasing anglers who've got the time to move on to fish that they see during a trip.
Yeah,
Most of us don't have that luxury.
no,
How do you get one night a week? Is that
generally, yeah.
one night a week.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that you're not wasting your time? Like, give us a breakdown of what you do within that 7-day period, let's say.
So I would think that realistically, it's a bit different. So it's a spring. It's all very seasonal, I think. So for me, for spring, it all boils down to very simply work, like just how much effort and work you're going to do. So I can't be fishing multiple nights a week, but I've got two little dogs that most of the venues are allowed dogs.
Mhm.
I have very extended dog walks, and my dog walks are extremely unsociable hours.
Yeah. Okay.
In the autumn, the dogs are getting walked after dark
Yeah.
at prime,
Showing time.
at ridiculous times in the night. In the summer, the dogs are being walked at at ludicrous o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yeah, it can be.
And midnight in the autumn.
Yeah,
Right.
it's been known.
10 till midnight. then.
Yeah, just when you think it's going to happen. So, and it's not
Your
a question.
poor dogs, like most dogs, love walks. Yours must be like,
That's what
we're
I'm
stopping again. Like,
Mate, my dogs, when it gets to the autumn, if that spot, which it isn't very often, but if it's
Yeah.
near the car park, the dogs are out.
yeah,
They're round the tree. They're tied up. I'm spomming for 2 hours. Then we go home.
Yeah.
The dogs know the drill. Like,
That's what I'm thinking, because dogs love a routine, don't they? So
Yeah.
I'm thinking when Matt's not going out for a midnight walk, the dogs are just wide awake, waiting to go out.
The dogs, because of work, the dogs get a good life. They
you take them with you on your jobs.
Yeah. If I'm looking at the lakes, they get to come sometimes.
What dogs have you got, Matt?
Border terriers.
Nice.
Yeah, they're cool little dogs. So I've got a mum and a little pup.
But little do they know that you don't actually love them. They're just a tool.
They're a game changer.
Yeah.
Absolute game changer. Yeah. So, but
So you walk in regularly to
Yeah.
start with. Yeah.
yeah, you just in the spring, you're trying to be there at the times where you think you're going to see them.
Right. So I'm going to stop you quickly because you're going out at 4 o'clock in the morning
Mm.
and you have maybe even no prospect of fishing that week sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
And in the autumn, it's lashing down 10 at night, big
Yeah.
southwesterly, whatever you're out listening
Yeah.
from. That's still a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And none of us are getting any younger, Matt. I mean, is that sustainable?
I'd like to think it is, but it does get harder. I
And
think.
how does it fit with the missus? Just accepts that because these are dead hours to family time anyway. Their kids are in bed. And
That's
stuff,
the key. Yeah, the kids are they're going down. They're going to read a book, go to bed in the morning. They're not up at those times. I've heard it on this before about it is a selfish hobby.
Mm.
There's no way about it. Like
But you're going about it in a very selfless way, though.
as far as you can.
Yeah.
But I don't think you try and be a good dad, and I think that you'd be lying to yourself if at some point this doesn't have some impact on that. Just being brutally honest.
Yeah.
I love my kids to bits, but you get caught up in this obsessional thing. Even if it's anti-social hours, which is what it is. I'm tired the next day.
But it's only you. Yeah, okay. I was about to say it's only you that suffers, but it depends on how well you can deal with being tired.
Yeah, if you're out and like you're dead right. Like the lack of sleep thing, it does affect. It's terrible for you. Like it's ridiculous to be doing it, to be honest. But it becomes a bit of a thing. But then you get the results off the back of it. But if you've been out, like in the autumn, I'm often out there I'd have driven 20 minutes. Then you get to the swim, that's another 20 minutes. Then you're in your chest waders up to your nipples, out on some bar, spomming at 120 yards, and you've just finished the first bucket. You're halfway through a podcast. I've got another 3 buckets to do, and then it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be back in 2 days, and then I'll be back in 2 days, and then I'll do that night. Now, it is all a bit. You catch them. Don't get me wrong, you do catch them, but for the sane man, it's a lot of mucking around, and to do it at a time where it's not. I don't want to go before 9 o'clock.
So just to bring it back round, Matt. Let's get back into this sort of a typical week. Like, you know, you're out walking the dogs. Let's take this time of year, for instance. Like, imagine it's a normal working week. I'm sure that doesn't exist, but talk us through how you're getting into the right position for your Friday night or whatever it might be.
So we're summertime now, really. So that little bit after spawning is probably done, where they go a bit mad. To be honest, depending on where I am, I often give it a little bit of a break post spawning. Depends what I'm fishing for, but I don't really like sort of smashing them up after they've spawned too much. But so summer fishing would essentially be, I tend to use quite a lot of particle then.
Yep.
And it's about applying an area where I think they're going to visit regularly, so that you'll get sort of prominent weed beds, bits and pieces. Now, all of that is affected by how busy it is. So, like, depending where you're fishing, you know, like your options, invariably on a lot of places these days, you're not going in some prime swim. You know, you're going out of the way. But what I like about the summer is the let's say that tree line, which generally a bit deeper, bit sort of darker, siltier, kind of left alone. This is the time of year where they'll start spending more time in those little bits and pieces, right, where, because, you know, I think as the summer progresses, they become less focused on the heat. You know, where they're in the spring, they're all about sunshine, heat. They're in those obvious shallow bits trying to warm up. Like, they will, I think, sort of stretch themselves and tuck themselves away under bushes, bits and pieces. So this is small pit fishing, obviously. Yep. So I'll kind of try and work out primarily, if it's, I don't know, let's say there's 15 areas on a lake, I think, right, well, realistically, there's only 3 of these where I'm going to be left alone. And then I'll try and identify where I think the fish are going in there. Then I would let it down at length to find some bits I'm sort of happy with. And these are drops through the silt, are they? Because obviously if you're talking about blackish stuff, yeah, in something like that, that would be an instance where I'm either looking for very firm silt, or I'm looking for clay bits and pieces, something a bit different to that normal black rubbish. You know, hopefully some nice vibrant weed under there, but, you know, I've probably not got the luxury of fishing in those areas a lot of the time. So you're fishing generally near a feature. Let's say there's a weed bed out there, something like that, where I've noticed the fish are spending a bit of time, and I think, well, I can transfer them across to there. One thing I do try and factor into that is how many can I have from there, even on a low stock venue. I don't want to be fishing like down the edge, a rod length out, whatever it is, because you might catch one, but that's it, it's done. Like, you're dragging them back through where you've hooked them. So I'm trying to, if possible, get something set up where I can go round, again, this is all small pit stuff, but go round on the other side of the bay, wherever it is, and easily apply volumes of bait, generally particle, onto that thing accurately. But from the point where I'm fishing it, either by changing the line angle or whatever else, I can get a few off it. Okay. Because so they've got to be able to access your spot easily, and preferably from all directions. Yeah, for me, there's a lot of different things on where I'm trying to choose. Ideally, I want somewhere which is relatively shallow. It's near the fish. It's got some reason why they would go there, and I think sometimes it might not even, they might not be there yet, but for whatever reason, I think they will use that area, and then I will, in the summer, apply a lot of particle to that bit regularly. And like I was saying, I'm trying to get somewhere where it's no good having like something that's kicking off if I'm fishing from here to the Chair Away, because yeah, you'll drop in on a Friday and you'll catch one. But each time you do that, and then you play them all the way through that, you're undermining the confidence of the others. You know, you don't want to be on that.
You're picking it. You want to pick them off.
Yeah, you
stealthily sort of thing.
Yeah, if you're fishing across to the bay from the other side and you've got it all clipped up and it's all spot on, and you've spent a lot of time making sure you've line lay, you've raked it from the other side, you've got your line down, you've got everything set for when you turn up. So then you can build on that, and it's not a question you have one on a Friday. You might have two, and then you come back the next week, you have another two, because in the week on that 7-day period, once it starts to work, you're constantly sort of topping it up. And again, you might have other areas around the pit which you're using. If that doesn't work out, you kind of got other things.
So in terms of, tell me about, first of all, the makeup of your particle. Are you adding anything to it to attract the fish that they might need during the summer? Second, how often are you applying it and the volumes? And I guess third, how long can you possibly string these things out before people start clocking it?
Yeah, again, all of those are sort of a bit different. I think that for the pre-baiting, just because of, I will go quite heavy in the summer at times, very heavy.
Specifically?
Where I've been at the moment, I'm putting like 20 kilos out at a time, you know.
Wet weight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't loads, but...
A couple of buckets, is that?
Yeah, it's a couple of decent sized buckets,
Yeah.
but you go down most syndicates, you don't want to be that guy shinning that lot in, do you? Like you have to be a bit, and I genuinely don't want to muck about with other people's fishing either. So that's always got to be, it's part of the thing on that is that's why you've got those unsociable hours. Going back to that Woolpack thing, on a Sunday night, I can't remember who it was, someone used to stay really late on the Sunday, and then Mark Watson would drive down from Doncaster, taxi or whatever he was.
Yep.
So he would get there early, like very early, but there was a window on that Sunday night where there'd be no one there. So I would be getting out of bed at 3:00 in the morning, and again, out of the way swims where people wouldn't normally fish, but filling it in with a view to, and the amount of times I drive to the lake with bait that comes back with me.
It's heartbreaking, mate.
You've got to do it. Like,
no, I mean the sense that you turn up and there's an unexpected angler, and you're like,
yeah,
I can't put this out.
But it's just all part of it. I mean, I'm quite lucky. Over the last few years, I haven't done that style of fishing that much. It's much more. It's different, like there's a bit of space and you can get things on your own terms. But when you're in that environment where there's other people around it, you just got to drive home with it.
No, and it's fair to say if you've learnt from someone like Rob Farron, who, from what I understand, is a master of playing the game. He's a chess player, isn't he?
Essentially,
of an angler. And other anglers always come into your fishing, then, don't they? They have to be considered on waters like the Woolpack, for instance. Yeah,
I think it's just that thing. Like I don't go fishing for drama. I go for the opposite. So the last thing I want to do is get caught up. I'd like to think I've got a lot of etiquette.
You almost don't want to see another angler.
I don't.
The whole time.
If I'm fishing on a lake, if I'm fishing on a small lake, I am not baiting up unless there's no one there. Pretty much, it's just.
But it's crucial to what you do, though. So you're having to come back, aren't you, the next night or whenever
and come
it
back
is.
again,
and
come back again, and keep coming back. And if you can't get it in, then you've just got to keep your eyes on the lake and try and build up as much of an idea. There'll be feet, you see them 2 mornings on the bounce on the back of that second bar, and then you have to sort of, when you fish, find that area and then bait that a bit and just do it that way. But ideally you want to be turning up with it in play.
So you were about to tell us what's in your pre-baiting mix anyway.
The pre-baiting mix generally is just odds and sods, really. Like there might be some, like we said, some sort of 10 mil cell in there, but a lot of hemp. I mean, hemp, it traditionally would have been a lot of hemp, but like that, it's garbage now. Like I was having this chat the other day, like whenever I buy hemp, you struggle to split it.
Really?
It's floating. It does my head in, really. A lot of crushed nuts, pigeon conditioner, stuff like that, really. In all honesty, I think for the pre-baiting thing, I don't think it's utterly essential that it's like premium quality, because I'm very much, they swim around eating crap off the bottom all day. It's more about having a safe area which they're not generally fished for, yet every time they visit that area there's food there, and there's something there, and that consistency of whenever they come through there's something there to drop down on, to have a little go.
And are you adding the things that you ultimately want to catch them on in the pre-bait?
Yeah, as you build to it, so it depends.
So the makeup changes.
Yeah, so in the autumn there's a lot of boilies. That all switches over, so it's very much sort of boilie focused.
Is that because you think it's better, or because that's a cultural thing within angling?
I think, in my experience, in the summer when the natural is up and they've been pressured and they've been hammered, I've always found, I know a lot of people sort of go full bore fish meal and everything else and pellet and all this. For Woolpack in particular, like getting bites on boilies in the summer, I always used to find to be hard work. Like they'd much more readily have either naturals or particle or something a little bit subtle, I think.
Yeah.
And then you get that window probably second to last week in August where I think it switches over, where they've done their harvesting in terms of the shrimp, and then moving more bloodworm focused, and then there's still a lot of crumb. You know, I use a lot of boilie
Because of birds.
I just like it.
Yeah.
I've always liked boilie crumb back from when people didn't use it. You know, like we said, Webby and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what we used to use, like loads of boilie crumb and stuff. I just think it keeps in those little prep areas. You're trying to keep them there as long as possible, really. Grubbing round bits and pieces. For the autumn, yeah, definitely much more boilie based, but still a lot of crumb, a lot of half baits. I don't like big baits. I think that little bits and pieces, although mechanically it's more challenging to fish efficiently, I think, with stuff like that. I think if you can get it sorted, they will much more readily pick up a 10 miller than they will a 20 miller or whatever else, you know. And if you've got other bits and pieces, smaller particles in there, I think again it helps them drop their guard.
And it sounds a bit like you're a spot angler most of the year. Like the idea that you're fishing 10 millers, you're not going to. That's not chod and spread tactics, is it? That's still over the spot.
Yeah.
And how long would you expect the life of a spot? I know we're talking generally, but how long would you hope to get out of a spot?
It very much depends on the quality of the spot. You know, when you're onto you get that buzz, don't you, when you find an area? Like sometimes you're like, this is the one. And you can, I know everyone talks about spots blowing and getting too big and this, that and the other. I think sometimes you can rinse the lot off it. You know, I've done it, you know, but
yeah, I mean, does that mean that, because you hear said a lot that the spot is too big, too clean?
Yeah.
Is that a thing for you?
It can be. I think it's more, most of the lakes we're talking about are low stock. Let's say for argument's sake, sub 15, whatever it is, sub 20, where if you're catching off there, I think half the time it's that thing of they're not in there on their own. There's 4 or 5 of them in there, and then something happens and one of them gets caught, and then that's out of the mix. And invariably on these lakes, like we always call them, like party starters, there's the same 2 or 3 who are in straight away smashing it up.
Right.
You go and take them out of the equation early doors, it affects those others, the more subtle ones, the more naturally cautious ones. They've not built up the confidence on that area at that point. So if you go and nail the 3 party starters off that spot too early, those others haven't built up the confidence. There's a bit of wariness about the spot and it's done. So it's timings apart, and then it's also that your line lay in and everything else, it's never as good as what you picture it sometimes, and you get that feeling for whatever reason that this spot isn't working up. You pick 1 or 2 off it, but you're having to really work it. You're forcing them into it. Those kind of spots die quite early, whereas if you occasionally hit like the gold mine where you, for whatever reason,
they like it there already, and
already. They're passing through there all the time. They've not been smashed off it recently, and with something like a clay ledge or something like that, it's already big. You know, there might be a bit of onion weed around the edge of it or whatever else, but it's already pretty captain obvious. But it's just I've got experience on those kind of things. You can just pick them off one after another if the setup's right.
It's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? Though, if you're catching how do you avoid catching the party starters for long enough that you might get a rare one?
I think you've got to, if you can pull it out over an extended period of time, that's when you the others
So
are
do you
in.
ever back off and think, I've had 2, let me bait a couple of times, 3 times more, have a
Not-
week away? Or
Probably not intentionally, but it happens.
Yeah.
You know, like that is just the way it happens because of my schedule. I never. That's what keeps you keen, I suppose. I never get to finish it in a couple of sittings, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, you get lucky, you catch the one you want, but it's not like you catch. There's many times in recent years where it is going right off, like ridiculously, and I'm going home and I'm not back for another week, and
Yeah.
there's still sloshing out there. Like, these are places where it's hard to get a bite, you know, and you're like, this is ridiculous. I'm walking away from this.
How do you square that with yourself?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? I've got no choice. I'm quite lucky, you know. We talk about a night a week these days, but the kids are a bit older. I've beaten the missus down, so to speak, sort of on the fishing front, to the point where she is a lot more relaxed about it these days. So I can probably go back and do a second night, but the idea of going back for a third or stretching it to a fourth, we're in deep water at that point. The ag is not worth. Well, it's just not an option. It's not fair on her, to be fair.
I mean, is it the case, you know, like most people who have that kind of setup, that B doesn't have the all-encompassing sort of obsession with something that A allows her to understand, or B perhaps takes her away equally, and you're able to sort of have that time when you need to be there, and it's reciprocated when you need to go.
No, it doesn't work.
Lots of women don't. I mean, in my experience, they're not as able to be quite as focused on a selfish pursuit as we are.
Yeah, I've trotted out similar things myself, you know, like, which never goes down well. But like it's exactly that. B does not. She's a family woman, you know, like the kids, the dogs, work, just.
She'd like to see more of you.
For whatever reason, like that she likes the family life. That is what she buys into. All this kind of, as she would say it, stuff I'm doing, she does not get it. Like and that's fair, you know. Like,
I mean, it's a ridiculous pursuit, isn't it?
It is ridiculous.
When you know, I'm sure there are moments when you're stood out there in the autumn, and it's, you know, the spom hasn't opened or whatever, and you're like, what am I doing?
Oh yeah. Well, there's no rational, you know. It's because you don't tell even your mates in fishing, you're not talking very often about what you do and everything. But if you're down with the pub with my other friends who don't fish, I can tell them about it because they don't know they couldn't tell her.
I find it quite fascinating that those friends probably know everything about your entire
I'll tell them anything,
information that we'll never get out of Matt,
but they cannot get their head around it. They're like, why are you doing that,
Rich?
Like,
I think we just need to go and sit at the table behind Matt's local.
We'll just we'll rig it with mics.
That's it.
No, it's genuinely not that interesting, or that certainly not for them anyway. But it's that whole thing, I suppose. Like, going back to B, she's just not interested in it. Like, family stuff is much more important.
Of course, and as it should be.
As it should be. Like, she is right-minded and I'm not, as far as that goes.
Let's be honest. Yeah. I kind of got this dread that what I said about women not being as focused is slightly misogynistic. It's not meant to be. Lots of women are incredibly focused on career or obsessive about sport or whatever it is. It was a generalisation. If I was wrong, I apologise. But
Rich.
I'm cancelled. Yeah. How often are these campaigns, coming to fruition, Matt? I mean, are you getting a couple of fish a week potentially, or are you talking a couple of fish a summer? You know,
it really depends. It just depends where you're fishing. You know, like the.
That's what I'm trying. I guess in answering the question, you're going to establish the kind of fishing that you do at the moment without overtly saying it.
They're not the kind of places you're catching every week. When you're catching every week, it's happy days. You know, like and again. The intensity of that style of fishing, you can't do that for very long. I'm not out there doing that every week. There's, depending on where I am, I'd be like, there's places where I'm very happy in the autumn. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm trying to achieve down there, and I'm not going to relentlessly flog it through July when it's
They're
just,
recovering from spawning. They're kind of like
it's
they're
just it's
not in
ju-
peak condition.
And, no, and again, like that will not fly. Not all that. I'll go fishing from time to time,
Yeah.
but it's much more of a. It might be a week here, a week. I do fish regularly in that time, but not all that kind of ridiculousness build up. That's saved for when I know I can
I
capitalise on
think
it.
you're one of the first people I've ever spoken to who it feels like you're saying the autumn's better than the spring.
100%.
Right. Because everyone says that autumn's not what it used to be now.
Spring, if I could fish 4 days a week,
Yeah.
and there they are, I'll move round, water bottle in at 4 o'clock in the morning, chuck out some bright ones.
Yeah.
Oh, they've moved over that. You can't do that when you're. That's going back to what you say about the media stuff. Location. I see the same stuff. Location. It's all about where they are. If you're not on them, you're not catching them. That's great if you're there a lot. If you're not there a lot, I'm there a lot because I'm walking the chuffing dogs around all the time. But I see them. I know where they are at 4 o'clock on Wednesday morning. I can't put my rods out until 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock on Friday night. So I'll know where they are on Thursday. But so does everyone else who's, these days especially, if you went back 10 years, that was different. Like if they're going to break out into the islands because it's getting hot or whatever else, then I'd look at the weather forecast and I'd be like, right, I'm having a day's holiday and slide in and fish off a hunch. There they are. They're blah, blah, blah. Chuck out some pineapples. There we go. Job done. Now there'll be 7 or 8 people there, not only on the day, but in that build up, they're there anyway. And that's, for me, spring fishing is stressful nowadays, but not, it's the best time of year to be out from the point of view, sitting there watching the sun come up, listening to the birds and just getting that kind of mental health fix. You can't beat it. It's awesome. But for me, in the way I fish, I'm not going to say I guarantee catching in the autumn, but the autumn generally goes pretty well. The spring is much more of a stressful thing. Like it's small windows where, because I've been doing it a long time and everything else, it does come right sometimes, but it's still that thing. There's a lot less guarantees in the spring. Like the hard work, you can work very hard in the spring, but if you're only doing a night or two here or there, if those windows aren't open.
Yeah. I've spoken to people about the same thing, and I think it's really important that we do talk about this. Spoken to friends of mine who are lucky to be, let's say full-time anglers or professional anglers is probably a bit more appropriate these days because they're not having to make quite the same financial sacrifices as the full-time anglers did in the 90s. But yeah, that you have to remind people occasionally that that magic combination of seeing fish on the morning and then setting up on that afternoon and then getting them the next morning isn't open to most of us.
No.
And often what you see one week is changed by the next week. So the strengths that we have to build as guys who get one night a week or possibly 2 or whatever it is, which I think is probably most people still, it comes down to prep and baiting, and that comes down to effort, and that isn't something that's easy for anybody, is it?
No, it's a grind, isn't it? Like the whole thing is there's a lot of grinding. Like I say, that's the thing. Like I often just sit there. It's late, I should be at home. I should be asleep, and you see those head torches come on in the distance.
Yeah.
I think, well, they ain't doing this.
Yeah.
And then you carry on because they're all friends of mine or whatever else, but they're probably. They can catch them on their terms, which is having a little bit more time than me. With the commitments I've got, that isn't something I've got. So if I'm not there doing that, but conversely, it does particularly in the autumn, it works in your favour because you're not draping lines across your areas all the time. That you cannot, if you get it right, you're feeding and building their confidence, and then you slide in. And
I think it's fair to say it sounds like you've more than made peace with the fact that you've got that time, and actually fishing is what it is now for you.
I wouldn't say I prefer it, but I think that there was a point in my life when I was younger where I could properly have screwed things up if I had carried on going down a certain road, and the choices I've made I'm quite happy with. Like I've got a lot of friends who fished super hard for a decade and then burnt out, and they're all off doing, they're all packed in, they're all doing different things. My mate Ed, like, you know, just lose interest, you know, like catching all the time, amazing fish. Now, I've gone down the long road, but I'm quite happy with what I've caught over the years. It's just taken me that bit longer, and it's all that bit less intense, but also it keeps me keen. I don't see a situation where I'll jack it in at any point.
Yep.
That just isn't on the horizon.
Is that, I mean, for me, that partly comes from the fact that I'm never able to achieve everything that you'd want to achieve, and it keeps you hungry, it keeps you coming back.
Yeah,
Because these guys who are intense can quite often, they can finish a lake in a year.
oh, for sure.
I've never done that.
No,
I don't think.
That's the thing. And like I said, there's without going into any specifics, there's places I fished where I could have got it done a long time before I did. Now, it works out quite well because the backups get bigger and bigger, and suddenly you're fishing for
Loads of big ones, yeah.
loads of big ones, and then you're loads of big ones, but you're catching these fish, which, let's say they were mid-30s, and then by the time you catch up with them, this backup's like a lot bigger.
Obviously, the other end of that is that some drop off the top, don't they?
Of course, yeah, and you
do miss them.
You do miss them, and there's certain ones where I just know I would have got it done.
What about paddle?
The paddle was a bit different with that one because that and cluster were the sort of two in there at the time.
Incredible fish, but you know, mid 40 mirror and a fish that topped 50 pound paddle in the end.
Yeah, no, they were mega fish in a mega lake at the time, and you had that changeover period where it had been very kept under the radar, you know, but intensely fished by some very good anglers, and then it changed ownership. There was a lot of other people. Most of the other people dropped their tickets.
Yeah.
Me and a couple of the other lads stayed on. You had an influx of new people, but you had that window that year where, although it was busy, the new guys didn't know the lake. Quite a few people held onto that ticket for that first year to see, and it meant I had a lot more freedom than before. So I had an amazing year that year.
Yeah, you should have detonated.
Yeah.
Like amongst people who were finding their feet.
Yeah, that's it. So you smashed them right up.
Yeah.
And then it got to that point where it's getting on in the autumn, and those two still haven't turned up, and you're like getting it. You know, some of them fish 4 or 5 times over at that point. So you're like,
how many fish in the lake at that
21.
time? And how many did you caught by the autumn?
24.
Right.
Yeah. So like it's one of those where and that's good going on there. 24 in a year like that.
What was so you're still fishing for the big two, but what about memorable ones from that year that Tobes can just throw up? Do you remember from that last year? Did you catch? Have we got any pictures of those?
Willie was one of those. Yeah.
I remember. That's with the elongated
the little Willie on his tail.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, is it on the
main tail.
Yeah. Lovely greyfish.
Yeah, just a sort of that's one that died.
But did you think that had you not laid eyes on cluster and the paddle at that point? Or?
So yeah, we could go on for hours about that. But like I've watched paddle shake me out. Like that fish was a funny fish. Like it had a very you could tell it straight away in the water, and it
must look like a great big long sausage with barely any tail.
It had no movement.
Right.
So it would do that like it very mechanical.
So you're flicking your hand quite aggressively.
Not good at this podcasting, but like it would sort of had a real mechanical tail on it, and it would go from, it never got caught at 50 while I was on there, but it was that kind of size every autumn.
48s, 49s, sort of up that way.
I photographed it when I first joined at just under 50, I think 49 something, but that was feeding all the time, every day, and it was away from the others. If you baited a spot, that would turn up and polish it. But
Matt, what the hell?
It would just it was very rare, and that you get caught up going back to this thing of probably not being led into things, you know, not being as competent as you want to be at that stage. Like the whole thing on there, that they won't have a pop-up, it won't have a pop-up, which is of course garbage. It got caught. I'm
sure. I mean, I was lucky enough to photograph that fish for Jim Shelley that year, or later next year maybe.
That was the year after.
It was a chod probably, wasn't it?
It was chodded, yeah. And I know another lad who chodded it the previous winter. I think they were the 2 captures.
I've just thrown that up, Matt.
That's Willie. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Willie. Yeah, but that's not you.
No, I
Is
look
it, Matt?
I've got Benjamin Button on the thing there.
That's Steve.
Yeah, that's
Webb,
Webby. Yeah.
yeah.
So me and we're sort of fished together quite a bit on there.
Does he still fish, Steve?
Kind of, yeah. He's
'cause
got
he's caught loads from that neck of the woods, hasn't he? That Cambridgeshire area.
yeah.
And Bedfordshire as well.
Yeah.
But
He's got his own sort of lake
right.
tucked away now. So he still gets out there.
And is that's a big carp. You can see is it upper 30 there? Matt?
37. I
Yeah.
think it's got
37.
there, Yeah.
In terms of strain, any ideas on that one?
Yeah, I think that one came down the river actually.
Yeah.
Swam across.
And that's one you caught on your last year.
Yeah, I caught that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So to get back to the paddle thing,
Yeah.
I can't get my head around how you didn't catch it, given it was turned up in every spot you baited.
It's one of those. I know for a fact it turned me
It
over.
was rigs then, but it comes down to rigs, yeah.
It just didn't move. You'd watch it and it would sit on the spot,
Yeah.
clean. It had hardly any movement in it, and I don't buy into all this. People get carried away with, and I was probably caught up in that as well at the time. Sort of rigs for certain fish and all that. Like Steve's a bugger for that, like getting obsessed with stuff like that. And I think looking back now, that I would like to think I would catch that fairly quick these days, but it was very anchored on the spot, very little movement, and when it did get pricked, it would sort of rise up and do this big exaggerated body shake thing once, twice, and then drop back down. And the amount of people get big pull up, hold tight, they pick up the rod, donk, donk, and then just reel it in. And that used to happen all
And that was paddle.
And I'm telling you, it was that fish all the time. Had a stubby little sort of
great mouth, by the way.
Yeah.
Great mouth.
Did you see its bottom lip was like that little
Short.
little short,
Yeah.
stubby bottom lip. And I think that, if you're fishing a high pop up and it goes back there, you're going to get some purchase. If you're sticking it on that stubby little bottom lip with a little size 8 balanced off on a caster set up, he's just shaking you out all the time.
So, out of interest, what would you have done differently?
Nowadays, well, the last little bit on there, I used a little pop-up rig, very low-lying, small thing and I had like 9 in a weekend on that. I would have just carried on doing that. The last year on there, it was just, that was the way. It just didn't come along. In the previous years was where I'd spent time fishing for that fish over bits and pieces and sort of making little sort of braided rigs and stuff like that. It just fished more conventional.
Why would the low line pop-up rig have worked better?
Because I think it would have taken it back.
Okay, you'd have hooked it further. You're avoiding the little granite bottom lip.
Yeah, I think it would have. It would have just. It would have. When I caught those fish, that was sort of springtime fishing, really, and it was just luck that it wasn't there. I think that if I'd been on it, I think I would have caught it on that rig. In fact, I know I would have done. The way I fish sort of tailored to that fish's kind of strengths in terms of avoiding getting captured. Little hooks.
So you couldn't have been fishing worse for it, really.
Yeah, I was deliberately fishing away from it almost, if you know what I mean. Like you'd see it, it'd be on the spot every day, and I'd be overnighter in it. And every time, those 2 I caught, they're not there anymore. That one's missing because I had him.
Yeah.
And he'd still be there day in, day out. And then I'd pile a load more casters in and come back, pile a load more in, and then he'd still be there. And then them other 2 had disappeared because I've had them. And then you get that thing where you get a couple of bleeps and you're like, what's going on here? And you check enough. And eventually it's kited like right down into the bay. And then,
so you had him on, basically.
100%. And then you go and he's not there anymore. Like that. It's I've had him on several times.
Okay. I mean, was it the death of that fish that called time on your time on the lake? Because I think Cluster survived beyond that, didn't it?
No, they
same year.
They all went, yeah.
Okay, so was it that, or did you have to call time on it before that?
No, so I kind of made a decision. I had some cool places to go, and I've been holding those cool places off for a couple of years at this point, and it was changing over, and the kind of thing we've talked about for my style of fishing, you can do it on those intense places, but it's doubly intense because you're going home with that bucket of bait all the time. You can't get your bait in.
Yeah.
The windows on what you can build towards are so small. And I just knew what it was going to be like that following year. So I just thought, no, if I won't lie, if I didn't have these other places to go, I would have just carried on. But I'd had a really good year, and you just think to yourself, this is going to be not that much fun. And I think that that was a watershed moment for me, really. Is like, now I've got to enjoy it. And I've had that philosophy ever since then, really. Like that, I don't mind working hard when it's me v fish. I'm not sitting around a lake, like circuit water fishing, for example. I couldn't be bothered with that. Like there's loads of cool fish out there that you can go and fish for, where you don't have to.
So this obsession of yours, is it driven by the carp, by those fish that are in your head when you turn up at the lake? That's what I want to catch still, like still to this day. Certain fish still are what get you out of bed. Right. Okay. What do they have to be? Like what's interesting about these carp? Do they have to be massive or
it's nice, but it's not always possible. It's hard, like that we're talking about, those sort of Galician-y style fish, they tend to bottom out at 50s. Some go mid 50s, but there's not many go beyond that. Like and a 50. You look at somewhere like that Woolpack, Paddle did 50. I don't think any of those of other Galicians got anywhere near that, really. And to be honest with you, Paddle came from that first stocking where there's lots of Italian-y ones and cluster and the ones that went up the valley, that though single and all that, they're different, those fish. They're obviously a bit more genetically prone to getting. You look at somewhere like Stoneacres, the amount of bait that gets. And
this is what I had in my head. I was lucky enough to film what is probably only Stoneacres, maybe off the top of my head, it might be its fourth 50-pounder ever. The other week, that No Name, which is obviously a former horseshoe carp, I think, 51 pound, and they it takes an eternity. They're topping out at that, but in a way, it seems a miracle that they got that big. More special because they did. Those sort of scaly Oxfordshire strain, Gloucestershire strain, whatever you want to say, that end up getting that big, are super rare, aren't they? I think that's what you're coming round to, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that it's not common for them. You look at Stoneacres, rich pit, shallow pit, tons of bait, fish for years, and it's not throwing up loads of 50s, is it? I know other pits where
there are pits that have done several generations of big ones in the time that those fish have been growing. Doesn't make Stonies any less special, because of how unique those fish are. But yeah, in terms of growth,
I think
your clusters are probably a bit bigger, aren't they?
They are. I think so, and I think that, going back to what we're talking about, they don't need to all be 50-pounders, but there needs to be something about them. Again, I always think fishing's a bit like stamp collecting with camping thrown in, and there's certain. In my head, I've got a little list of 6 or 7 that I'd like to catch before they die, and they'll all be gone in the next 10 years. They're either fishing on lakes where they're not otter proofed, they're all old as the hills, most of them, and they're just ones that fit into what I like to catch, or they're ones that are a bit different, still cool, but I've not caught many of that type, if you know what I mean. And
it's obviously a very private pursuit for you as well, because we'll never see these fish, Matt. The press will never see these fish, and probably half the people in this building will never see these fish, despite them being colleagues of yours. Why does it have to be such a intensely private pursuit?
I suppose it's twofold. One, because it's like I said before, that I never, as a kid, my fishing would have progressed a lot quicker if I'd been reading magazines, and I was just out basically on my own doing it and learning the very difficult way. Like, it takes a lot longer to learn that way. So it's never been kind of that social. I've never felt the need to do that. And the other thing, some of the places I fish, they're set up that way. The guys that fish them, they're very private. They're friends of mine. If I was to start showing pictures round, it would it's just it's why piss them off, you know? Like I don't do social media really. I have to admin some of the groups at work, but I remember I caught my first 30 pounder when I was living with my granddad, and I came back and he was oh, you know, like, because our chat had told him, and then he went and got the photos from Boots and stuff, and that was it. I didn't tell anyone else because there's no one else to tell. It was just me and him, and like my nan didn't care. Like it was just one of those things where
the crazy thing is, it always slightly occurred to me that the waters where there is no publicity allowed, kind of, it almost has a self-vetting sort of atmosphere, because the guys that go can't benefit in any other way than simply catching the fish and having the photos in their own album. You have to be very pure in your motivation, don't you, in that sense?
And this, what I like about carp, it's a bit of something for everything, you know. Like with the work thing, it's very different, and there's a whole, you can, if you like some of the guys I know, you know, they don't even take photos of them. They catch amazing fish, and literally it's all about that moment. You can't get more pure than that for me. Like they just literally unhook
maybe
them.
but then equally, if you're collecting stamps, you don't chuck the stamps away, do you?
But it's sort of, I don't know what, I
burn
can't
them, you know.
I don't quite, it's weird. They just go, and I suppose the pleasure of the fight, whatever it is, and then at the other end of the spectrum there's completely the opposite, where you can do,
because by the way, it's not like that's a pure way of fishing.
No.
Richard Walker took photos of Clarissa at the very birth of modern carp fishing. It's not like they're harking back to some kind of forgotten golden era. We've always photographed our quarry.
Exactly.
So that's a very private thing that they do, and
Yeah.
they're gaining pleasure out of some other part of the pursuit, aren't they?
I think so, yeah. And it's not, and again, I think with the whole sort of, I don't know what you want, sort of secret squirrel side, it's not something to be like nowadays. I know with the media, some of it's almost like a bit culty, do you know what I mean?
Do you know what
Like,
blows me away is the people who post shots and then blank their faces out or something, or the background. It's like, just don't post it.
Yeah.
If there's anything compromising about that picture, whether it's your identity, the fish's identity, or whatever, just don't post it.
I think and I won't lie, there's a level of self. One, I genuinely don't. For me, on a person, I don't mind if other people do, but for me, I just don't have an interest in sharing the pictures. And then there's an element of self-interest. You know, some of the places like, people will Google you. The first thing they do, if you've proposed seconded, people will Google you, and if your name comes attached with a carp, you ain't getting in. You know,
Did you have to consider this when you took a job working for Danny Fairbrass, effectively?
Yeah.
Who one of the most high-profile carp anglers we've ever seen.
Okay, yeah, going back to that, I think the reason I took this job initially was that seeing the damage of the otter thing, and we were chatting about it earlier. Like it's a very different world now. In some sense, we kind of know where we are with it.
Yeah,
it felt pretty drastic.
Raw.
Yeah, back then, like whatever we were, 2014. A lot of places I care about were, you know, potentially going to be totally written off, and that opportunity to help with that, and also to set up new fishing lakes, you know, like, and set the whole thing, you know, that trumped anything else really.
And do you know what, from my point of view, Matt, it also took the wind out of the sails of a lot of the kind of extreme, negative, aggressive discourse that was happening on social media towards otters at the time, because here was a way that we could take action. Here's someone doing something about it. So it wasn't just guys feeling frustrated and wanting to kill as many otters as they could lay their hands on, which was hopefully very few. But it legitimized. It gave us a legitimate way forward, didn't it?
And we won't go back to that thing we talked about earlier with the interview. That's what I was like. How I know what the problem is, because you'd seen it at that stage. Yeah, I've sat there and watched very special fish getting dragged up the bank, and you're like, what? How do you resolve? Well, Dan put his money there and had the force of personality to try and do something about it. And like you say, no one got into I didn't get into fishing as a kid to be involved in the persecution of otters or being involved in a sport that is in conflict. It's a disaster. It's a disaster for the sport. That the hard line. Otters are just doing what they're designed to do. And I know there's a lot of politics about it and everything else, but from what we do, we try to, as best we can, help people get fenced as cheaply as we can and as efficiently as we can. And that's always been been the mission statement.
It
with
has,
already.
but obviously we spoke to Dan in his interview about the fact that that's had to fall away to a degree. Presumably, it is given the purity of motivation you had when you came into it, it must be an ambition of yours to reinstate that part of Embryo when things are.
Yeah, I think it's a lot, even from Dan, to be honest. Like JT deals with fencing, James, and he does a lot of work now. So it's changed from when we did it all ourselves, which obviously Dan's very aware of. We had that team. That wasn't really sustainable. Like the lads who did all that for us, they put a lot. We're talking about sacrifices.
And you were fencing fisheries for free for clubs and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we still do that very regularly. Very regularly. But the even the fencing at cost. When I started in 22, we were doing big sites for £10 a metre, and lots of them. £10 a metre, fully installed, that spec there.
And obviously with the global situation, what's that looking? What are you looking at now? What's even tenable now for?
20 quid and you're doing well.
It's doubled.
Oh,
right?
absolutely doubled. Just we never see what we did before. We had a team of people who'd go and do it. It's a very heavy lifestyle, that going around the country, living in bivvies, banging up fences. It's not sustainable. It's too hard on those people for the rewards. So we've moved to a model where we now use a couple of approved contractors. We get the materials because we bulk buy the materials from Hampton Steel, and we can pass that price on to customers and tie it in with these contractors. We don't make a penny on it, but you get a very good service from the lads who do the work, and obviously they're going to be paid to do it because that's their job. They're independent fencing contractors. But again, because we bulk buy all the metal there, the price we get for it, is decent. Yeah.
So the only people making a profit are the actual contractors.
Yeah,
in that situation.
The steel. I'm not going to pretend like Hampton don't make money on it.
No, of course. I mean, that's unavoidable, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but ultimately, the only money that's ever made is through them and through the contractors.
Yeah. I suppose because of the success of Embryo in terms of securing new headline waters, a lot of that fencing work isn't talked about, or perhaps I don't see it, Matt. You don't shout about the fact you're fencing for cost effectively.
Yeah, it's one of those things with Embryo because we're having like a dedicated media person as such is not something that's we're trying to make. Money is a strong word because, as you know, like we're millions of pounds in the hole to Dan and to Corder, but having sort of someone to shout about these things would be yet another job role. So we have tried that, but it's something we're very conscious of that we haven't got. Particularly, you look at the list of lakes we've fenced and we've either lost money at or we've done at cost, and that whole fencing bill would be very, very, very substantial. But there's it is a bit of a frustration that we haven't got that public awareness out there of that, to be honest.
No, and equally, I'm sure that when Embryo is able to sort of balance the books, we'd all, because, as part of the media stuff that we did around the launch of Embryo, and it was a big part of that was fencing other people's fisheries, wasn't it? Yeah. And I'm sure that you'd like to get back to doing that. More of that. I hope you would.
Well, yeah, 100%. I mean, JT is out quoting most weeks and middleman in materials and doing all these things. So there is a lot of lakes fenced via us one way or another. But having some awareness, I think, out there would certainly push it. I do think that when we first started, you effectively had very few people doing it, and I think so. There was the opportunity to do it through us at £10 a metre, or maybe have it done by some people who were doing it for the first time for £25-30 a metre or whatever it was. So nowadays there's a lot more people doing it, and the material prices are higher almost across the board. So I think it's easier whether people use us, or it will be cheaper to use us. As I say, we don't make any money on it, but there are other options now. Whereas I felt in 2014 it was almost unsustainable to do it, other than a couple of people who were doing it at the time.
More widely, on the Embryo thing, how many lakes you at now, Matt, off the top of your head?
Individual lakes, we must be up near 40. I think sites, we've got 20.
Right.
Yeah.
And how many did you secure in that first year?
We opened, well, in the first half year, we opened 1, and I think then sort of 2 the following
it's
year.
exponential, the growth is realistically, isn't it?
Yeah.
Are you at a position where, I'm pretty sure that Dan said that sort of lake purchases, for instance, were kind of on hold while you stabilise the situation with the money you've had to sort of borrow effectively from Corda? Does that mean that you're happy with the portfolio, or you're constantly looking for new opportunities?
Well, we're always looking for new opportunities. I think that I suppose the handbrake would be on to a degree, but then Dan is the man who we've been out looking at lakes this week, and he's sort of like, yeah, we'll definitely take this one, so it really depends where. I think we in the world we are now, everyone that you look at everything that's going on here, we have to, all this money pays for everyone else as well, so you have to be careful.
Has Embryo's core mission changed, Matt, since you've been involved? Like, where would you say that is now? What is Embryo for? I
think it's still the original core mission as such was fencing and fisheries, and effectively it's still those two things. There's a lot of focus on the fishery side of things, and I think that that's good. That if you looked across those, whatever it is, 40 lakes or 20 sites, how many of those were fisheries before we got involved? Probably 3, maybe. Abingdon, Devils. I'm trying to think where else. In terms of proper actual fisheries, almost none. Like we're obviously Vauxhall, but they, again, in each of those cases we've just talked about, they've come to us to say, look, take it. We're struggling. So in terms of where we are right now, like that's a bunch of new lakes for the future, all created. So I never saw it going that way. I'm sure when you interviewed me, we weren't talking in those terms, were we? No. Definitely not.
No, this was just a quite raw emotion from Dan to do what he could to stem this kind of otter issue, right?
Yeah.
And Embryo's actually become a bigger beast, hasn't it? Than
fairly early on, you got an idea we could do this, but the scale of it, there's so many. And the nice thing is they're all different, and they all cater for a whole wide range of different angling abilities and sort of interests. But I'm proud of all of those lakes one way or another. It is something you can. When I work for Coca-Cola, you sit down and you're making sugary water that isn't very good for people. When you're doing this, when you walk around Norton Disney, for example, and you sit down and help someone catch a fish who's new to it and is enjoying being outside, and that level of excitement when they catch one, it's more than I get. I'm diluted now with. It's great to see like that. That's what I like about it. Yeah.
Wider issues around fisheries, Matt. Given that you're probably, I'm guessing you're the biggest fishery owner in the country now. That there can't be anyone else with as many fisheries as Embryo.
I don't know. I think in terms of dedicated carp fishes, I'd probably say so.
So, from my perspective, a great deal of what our carp fishing future looks like in the UK is in your hands. Right. Because there's going to be waters on everyone's doorstep in the end from Embryo. They're probably going to be most areas of the country, or hopefully there are, that your reach will extend to the, out of the kind of central and southern heartlands into everyone's back garden. I know you've got stuff in Yorkshire. Not sure about Lancashire, where I'm from, Merseyside, where I'm from.
Yeah,
but,
we have tried.
Right.
Yeah, we do want one in the northwest, but obviously the clubs up there have
strong still.
Strong, yeah, and they're doing a good job. And
you've fenced my local fishery.
Which one's that, Tobe?
The iCarp lakes.
Oh yeah,
done on them. Yeah, they look really good, mate.
Yeah,
really good. Yeah, they're really smart.
Yeah, it's a cool little site, that, isn't it?
Oh mate, love it. I'm going this weekend.
But the fish that you stock now are going to outlast us all. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they don't. To be fair, and we live to like 100.
Yeah, that's a much better outcome, Rich.
Hopefully, they, but. And they live to 100 as well, but you never know.
Yeah.
How much responsibility do you feel to us as a wider community that that you make the right choices on stock? Because all I see now is a relative. Trying to think of a simpler way of putting it. Carp kind of start looking the same because of where we are and because of the way we've been. When you had this kind of Wild West period in the 80s, probably when fish were moved round wholesale everywhere, chopped and changed. They looked totally different. You had the chocolate box type waters, whereas now that isn't, you can't create waters where every carp looks different, right? Or can you?
It's definitely a thing. So I know we have sort of touched on this briefly before, but you're on the scale that we do it. The commercial fisheries, we try and be fair to people, so we can't buy fish off everyone. So we use Simon and Viv, and we use Simo, and we use Tom and Jez at Priory.
Yeah.
We've bought some from Ross in the past as well. We do try and mix it up. I get,
because you're a guy that appreciates a mixed stock, Matt.
yes, absolutely, and I think
And so's Dan.
yeah,
to be
absolutely, and I think I know we did talk about this before, but like one of the things for me, that growing up, that regional thing, I liked that. Like you could see that one's from Cambridge, that one's from Oxford, that one's from Kent, that one's from Bedfordshire. You could see it, that those hubs of where those fish came from. That was good. I like that.
And actually, we've been fantastically bad at preserving those. Scotty has done probably as much as anybody with the VS stuff to preserve some strains.
Yeah.
But as a sport, we've dropped the ball, haven't we? Really.
Yeah.
If you're interested in carp looking different.
Yeah, I think it's, again, what you realise is there's a percentage of people like me and you who would care about that. There's probably a much larger percentage with the guys I go out and spend time with out around the fisheries who are not as fussed.
They just look at a pretty carp.
Pretty carp,
they're blown
nice
away
scales.
with it.
Yeah, and that's fair play. It is horses for courses. We are doing some things to try and preserve some of those. I used to use the term heritage strains, but I've seen that online a few times now, so I'll have to change that up. But you know what I'm saying.
Heritage simply means what we had when we came into the sport, right? So
yeah,
these are the things that were around that we inherited from our, forebears.
So we've got Shuttleworth College,
Yeah.
The fisheries course there. Neil, who's sort of the assistant down there, Neil Sampson, we're working with him. So we've purpose dug a number of little ponds there, and we're trying to. We've had a couple of failed attempts of bringing in eggs from these kind of older style fish, let's call it that, and growing those through. That's something as we speak that we'll be looking to do again with some potentially woolpack fish, some fish from potentially another special lake. We have to do that all legit, so that's all got to be done through CFAS. There's a lot of things that need to fall right to do that.
Which is kind of where the mastery that someone like Scotty and the experience he has is brought to bear, because he's been able to fully realise that process 100%. With the Harrow fish and some of the other fish that he's got.
Suttons and the whole thing. Yeah, it's very much it's to do it on a big scale for us is difficult. We are trying to do that. We will always buy fish from those guys.
Yeah.
They all do great fish. They're all really good to us.
Your appetite for fish must be vast in a year.
It can be. Some years it's extreme, other years not as much. Depends what comes online, but it's compared to most, it's pretty vast. And all of those guys have given us, all the people I just mentioned have given us a load of help over the years, like a load of help. Their fish are really good, so we will always buy fish from them because because of the scale of what we're doing. Within that mix, some of those Shuttleworth fish I'd like to think will come through and fit into maybe some niche venues and venues where they're not going to race up to £40 overnight. I know when Elbow came and filmed at the Roughs, we've got a few interesting fish in there it's a long game. It's a cool lake with some lovely little fish. So there is always an element of that, and it's trying to fit it in. It's a personal interest of mine, that, as you know. And
if your personal interests can't be indulged, Matt, then something's wrong, because obviously it only makes sense for Embryo to balance the books, right? Really, but that's not what you're going to do. You're going to have these projects still that don't make financial sense necessarily at the moment.
Yeah, I think we when we first started, we were very scattergun.
Yeah.
We had so many, the ambition on what we wanted to do, it's set now. So things like this, the Shuttleworth project being a good case in point, that's been a bit kind of here, there and everywhere. It's now just, we're waiting the next set of eggs, and that will work. And it's great because the kids at Shuttleworth are going to have that year working on them from the hatchery right the way through the system over the years. And eventually we get some fish on the back end, which are, nice, interesting fish. So that's the kind of thing. So that is cost neutral in essence, that however many we get out of the back end is our reward for doing it. And the kids get to, work experience on the job at the college. So things like that are really good, but they've not always worked as well as that.
Well, no, I mean, funny, I was chatting to Damien in the office briefly. We shot a podcast yesterday, and he remembers when you first started, your garage was crammed with fish rearing stuff, was it? I mean, you perhaps couldn't be. I mean, it's come a long way from that, hasn't it?
Yeah, we definitely won't be going back there again. That if you
once again, your poor long-suffering missus was like, what on earth is all this stuff? But
so I remember, I'll quickly talk about this, like so she'd cleared an area in the garden.
Yeah.
Put this little patio bit
I'm starting to have more sympathy with her as this goes on.
There's only one rational person in this game, but so she's got this patio area all sorted out, and she'd finished that weekend. All looked nice. Planted some plants up the back and everything. Neither of us are gardeners, so this was quite a deal. And while she was at work, we've lifted over the fence these 2 6x6 green koi rearing tanks for these fry to go in, and they look like bins, like huge biffa bins.
Yeah,
they've gone slap bang on side by side on this patio, and then my mates come around and put the electrics in, and by the time she's got home, it's all full of water and it's all starting up all this built. I mean, that was close to getting divorced. Like seriously, like we don't really argue very much, but like there was 2-3 days she weren't speaking to me after that. Like that was over the line, massively over the line.
Who can you turn to, Matt? Because obviously, is Dan on the phone all the time? Like, but what about if you've got like doubts? You've got like, if you need to get your head straight, like, is Dan the right guy for that? Can as a boss, or do you speak to other people in the industry? Like, what's the who do you turn to?
I think Dan's super approachable. Yeah. We speak all the time. He is very good to work for.
He must ring you a lot.
Yeah. And to be honest,
because this is like a huge passion of his, isn't it? Embryo.
Yeah, he's all over it. And in the same way, a lot of these decisions, it's Dan's project. So much as I try, and as you know, he's got a hell of a lot going on, but I do try and keep it out of his hair to a degree. It's very difficult because it's so personal to him, and he loves to be involved. So we speak all the time, and these days, speaking honestly, Rich, like the boys that work for us, they're all in. They all care about it. They all want it to work. We could all, I'm sure, earn more money or have more rewards doing other things, but we all love it. And down to a man, we all love it. And although it's a work thing, and I know I sort of head it up, that it's a good team. There's people there that I could speak to, depending on what it is, and which angle. There's always someone. It is a lifestyle. It is not just for me. A lot of those boys take the brunt of it these days. So you do need an outlet from time to time, because it doesn't matter how much fun it is. There's a lot of graft with it as well.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially dealing with landowners and these big corporate, gravel companies, for instance, must be bloody frustrating, Matt.
Oh yeah,
because things take forever, get bogged down in red tape.
It's solicitors,
right?
Solicitors. I'm sure there's a couple listening there. I don't, not our solicitors, I will say, quickly add. But in general, it's amazing. You can meet the landowner, you can shake his hand, you agree on something, everyone's happy, price is agreed, heads of terms are agreed. A year and a half down the line, nothing is signed. And when you're working on getting fish in, when you're working on getting a fence in, the timetabling of it all is is a chuffing
And
nightmare.
that must be tough to explain to Dan. I mean, not that he won't understand, but Dan is someone who, like, you know, who would see the simplicity of that situation and expect it to be done. Right.
There's so much red tape with it all. There's so many across the board, but that's like any business, you know. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot worse than us, but you know, just going back to the solicitor thing, like there's friends of mine took a lake on. I've done a lot of leasing. I've done a lot of fishing leases. We've got corporate ones. We've got ones for massive landowners. We've got ones for farmers. We've got whatever suits. You know, we've got a lease that is suitable in terms of the content. And a friend was taking this lake on, and it had gone on for ages, this lease. And I said to him, this is 6 months plus. We're all agreed. I was like, when they get that back from your solicitor, it'll be the first one that comes up on Google. It'll have loads of reference to fly fishing. It'll have a bit about canoes. And he literally got it back after nearly the best part of a calendar year, and that's what it was.
The copy and paste job.
Just Googled it and copied it and pasted it and sent it off like months and months and months later. And that's what I'm not saying that all solicitors do that, but the in terms of the way trying to nail down these things, it is a long game, and it's frustrating. We've got Michiel out in Europe doing that at the moment. I don't know if sort of Dan's mentioned his sort of European operation. I know Michiel is a very proactive, real go-getter kind of character.
Talk to me about why embryo is important in Europe, because obviously they don't have the otter problem.
No. Well, to be fair, they are getting it, but it's very low level at the moment. But it is starting to emerge, unfortunately. I think that Dan's vision there is very much that there seems to be a lot of fishing over there where if you're not as part of the Old Boys network, you know, luckily me and you are kind of the Old Boys network here, aren't we? We get access to these places. It's similar over there. If you've not been if you've taken up fishing fairly recently, there isn't as many options as what you would think from here. I know there's lots of great kind of coverall tickets as such.
The public waters.
Yes, there is a lot of that, but then there's a degree of rough and tumble with some of those, I think. So I think it's about another option. Again, I can feel good about that because we're not sort of upgrading or taking existing fishery. The focus will be on
new fisheries
for different people.
Yeah, you're not imposing an English way on someone who never wanted the English way in the first place.
Exactly that. I'm very conscious of that, and I know Michiel is too, that it's about giving European anglers other options as well in conjunction with what's already there.
And are indications that they do want this
Yeah,
stuff?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I think there's, like anything, there was a lot of hostility towards us when we first set up, within reason.
Which you must be used to by now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I get it. There's a lot of the people I grew up fishing with, or certainly in those early years, you know, they are cynical of anything. You know, they just are.
Of embryo even?
Yeah, I would say
you
so.
had to have some conversations with these guys about...
Yeah, certainly if they didn't know me, they would be absolutely cynical of it. And that it's no different in Europe. You kind of, and with embryo, you have to sort of judge us by what we do and see where it is.
Do you think if embryo had sprung up completely organically away from Corda, that its reception would have been different?
Yeah, possibly, but it would be very small scale. But I think the one thing I will say about it is that actually, I know we talked about that, but there's a lot more positivity from people I meet as opposed to online stuff, which again I don't really look at.
Well, I think embryo's here now, and people that period of, you know, when that initial hostility must have died down.
I think there was, I don't, the online stuff I genuinely don't care about, but the one thing I was keen about was there was a little bit of, I think lake owners felt that we were going to come in, some lake owners felt that we were going to come in and steal their lakes from them. Yeah. And that is categorically not the case. And I've had situations where people who either own or lease very prominent venues everyone would know, sort of saying either publicly or online that, you know, we're out there and we could have got, you know, we're going to take their lakes off them and this kind of stuff. Well, in at least 2 of those occasions, agents have offered me, prior to them saying that, their venues, and I've turned them down because I don't want to put someone whose livelihood is fisheries Why would I do that? They're out there, they're running their lakes. It's options for people. It's not what we do.
Yeah.
And I think people now understand that more. You see how many lakes we've got. If we wanted to go and take stuff off people, it would be very easy, but it's not at all what we want to do. And you look in Europe, I think it will be the same thing. People will realise we're not out to, stitch up the thing and charge, fill them full of fish and high, sky high prices. We're always sort of just under market rate, and if it's working and it's working for other people, we're not really interested in it, to be honest.
Yeah, which is great to hear, because I think the word that in the Topography interview that we did with Dan, which I'm sure you may have seen, I think I used the word monopoly just for a bit of like tabloid light,
Yeah.
But if you were a cynic, it could feel like that, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Embro is not going to stop.
No,
growing,
but it's. I think the thing to take from that is, if we're not taking established venues, if we're only taking new venues, don't get me wrong, we've got a situation at the moment where this may or may not happen, but someone has owned that lake for a long time, they've got to the end of their journey with it, they've got other things going on in their lives, and they said, look, there's a lot of work needs doing, do you want to take it over? I don't want to deal with it anymore. In that situation, we would say, yeah, why not? Because it's going to go to market, someone's going to take it.
And that could be a water ski club, that could be RSPB.
Absolutely. In that situation, it very likely not to be an angling club in that lake. So that lake would potentially could be lost to fishing. So things like that happen. But on the main, most of what we take over are complete virgin lakes. So if we double the amount, not that we're going to, but if we double the amount of options open to people, and it's all new venues, it's just more options for people to go fishing. So, yeah, I've got absolutely no problem with that.
What about the way that they are allowed to fish at these venues, Matt? Because obviously the one thing we have had historically is an incredibly diverse scene.
Yep.
Good and bad.
Yep.
Lakes that have, allowed certain things, lakes that haven't, and it's informed the character of the fishing on those lakes. Embryo is likely to have the same rules. Blanket rules across,
give or take. Yeah.
Good thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think
because you're an angler that's enjoyed fishing on a diverse range of club waters or whatever it might be.
Yes, I think there's always an element of, we've all fished those quirky places with quirky rules and puzzles to get round. And I won't lie, I do enjoy a bit of that. But I think it's got to be in the context of the rules we use are aimed at pushing these venues on. And I think when you speak to Dan, as I know you have, like in his mind, he doesn't want, same as everything else he does, he's not interested in 30 years time, especially with things that have gone on with his health and everything else. He wants to push it on so he can see it, and it's his investment. And I think that those rules maximize getting these places going as quickly as possible.
And you're now seeing that, and it's manifest that these things are happening.
Yes. Yeah, you can see it, like with the rules around baiting and bits and pieces like that, in the first few years it's sort of boilie and pellet only, because unless you do these things, there's a lot of I tried the best way to describe it. There's people always say, well, you're going to add 20 fish and leave it be, and then it'll be an exclusive little club for a few friends and that. But the reality is, I've got friends who've done that, and these lakes have got good fishing. And when they run it that way, no one fishes it. Like, people talk a good game about that, but I'll tell you right now, if we were to take a 10-acre lake and put 15 fish in C5s and say, right, get in at the ground floor, we'll chart, and the price, within a year, no one would be fishing it. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
And I know from experience, much as it seems very romantic and that you'd be able to sort of replicate, Yateley Car Park Mark II and all that, it's a long road to do that, and you don't get any buy-in at the start, because the people who want to be there when they're all 50s and that they ain't there in year one, they ain't there in year two. They might be, but they drop out by year 3 because we can't keep buying tickets and holding on to tickets forever not to fish them. I do a lot of that myself, but the reality of trying to run these, that you have to have a level of sort of pragmatism to it, really. I think you do. Like, we try and Dan's good with this. We do try and make it as diverse as we can. but it's not always possible or desirable to do it, the way that a lot of these places have evolved traditionally over 30 or 40 years.
Do you find actually that the generation of guys that then adopt that in that local area don't care anyway? They're quite happy with what you've instated, and it's perhaps a few people who used to fish the lake way back when that.
I don't. With the ones we've taken, none of them have been fished way back when, really. There is one or two exceptions, but generally speaking, they just haven't. So that's the thing. There is no heritage, and where there is. Stanton, Vauxhall, for example, we are very mindful of that. It's bit by bit. And Dan loves Stanton.
Yes,
as you know, like he loves it, and he's very focused on keeping the character of that place within. So yes, it conforms loosely to an embryo model, but there's even the rules and everything else. There's a lot of the things the way that lake functions that are slightly different to other lakes. They are all adjusted where we can,
which is great. I mean, diversity is we do want that, don't we? We all want that in our fishing. Do you see yourself, Matt? Let's imagine ourselves 15 years hence. Do you see yourself fishing embryo lakes?
Yeah, I do. I think that where I am now, just because of my quirky thing with it, there's half a dozen that I want to catch, like I said, and in 10 years' time they'll be gone. And when they're gone, I'm probably, what am I now? Best part of 45. I'll be 55. Do I want to be getting out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning 4 times a week to walk around and fish like?
Well, hopefully you do, but
I'd love to think
not,
so.
Yeah.
But
if you're Dave Lane or someone of that ilk, whether they're genetically predisposed to be hyperactive, then
I don't know Dave Lane, but it is crazy how the fact that he's out there doing it the way he does it is, you can only respect that. Like, he's no spring chicken, is he? To be fishing the way he fishes.
That could be you. You've got the same sort of build, Matt. You're maybe not quite as wiry as Dave, but you get
definitely not. But I think that I know when I was younger, there was always this thing. Oh, you can always retire to pit 1. Elstow, do what you're going to do and then retire to pit 1 at Elstow. And I've got the embryo thing. There will be by that stage 1,001 different options. There'll be the style of fishing.
Will any suit you? I think that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think there already are. Yeah. There's 2 or 3 that will very much suit me. There's that little Roughs Lake. I go up there in January. They're cool fish. It's a lovely, lovely lake, that, and it's run in a way that it fits me, that. And there's a lot of other lakes on the thing, but it's just until I get this itch scratched with these last few ones.
Well, it's like then I'll never drink again, though, isn't it, Matt? Until the next time you find a little pod of wild carp that are in the.
I think for the ones I like to catch, I think that the clock is ticking now. And I'm quite specific now about, like, commons, for example. I've caught big commons. I've caught cool commons. I've caught a lot of the type of fish that I'd.
Well, you fished in Nam Valley, so
quite. So that different types that there's not many different types of common that I haven't caught at a certain size, really. So given that, I'm not gonna. There is one on my list, the one that's just popped up, but they've got to fit in with what I want to do. So that's kind of a private kind of thing, little thing that. So I don't even really look at the pictures of what I've caught, but it's just nice to have that little sort of tick those boxes on those certain ones, which for different reasons mean things to me.
What kind of embryo fishery would appeal to you, though? Do you think your fishing will have changed? I think that's in your answer. Then you kind of implied that your fishing will have changed to a degree by then.
It might not, but
because that's a huge hurdle for someone like you whose fishing is so tough. You're up against it. You're talking low stock to then change to perfect tracks, great access, great parking, great swims, lots of carp.
I think it's so. I've got a ticket somewhere else, and I did a bit on there this winter, and I did a bit last autumn. I don't know what it is, 8 acres, 7 acres. It's quite a few in there, like loads more than what I'm used to. There's probably 150, 200 fish in there. It's well, and they're cool, like loads of cool fish. There's so much going on, like feedback wise, it's ridiculous. Like you see more in the morning than I see in a year normally, but right here and now, it's not the kind of place that I'd want to be religiously going to every week, but it's fun while I'm there. Don't get me wrong. And I think that I could easily see myself drifting into fishing that style more. And I think some of these embryo lakes will fit loosely kind of what I'm doing now. Yes, the facilities will be better. Yes, I'm not going to have to yomp 2 miles with a backpack on my back and all that carry on. Like it's much more comfortable, but at 55 I'd probably be up for that, you know.
Absolutely.
Probably be up for it now, in all honesty.
And I think one final question, mate. You know, when you visit Norton Disney, do you find yourself gravitating towards Pettit's Lake, or is that like, would you not fish there on purpose?
That is a thing, Pettit's Lake. I definitely did not name that, just so people know. I will say when I go up there, that is, I walked around the other day, and have you been there, Rich?
No.
It is cool. Like, it is genuinely cool. And I was walking around the back of Stocks Lake, because it's a nice wild site. It just gets better. It gets better every spring. But when walking around the back of that lake, bearing in mind 2018, it was whatever it was, 6 holes in the ground, and you're there now, and it's like a vibrant place. There's greenery everywhere, like all the colour. And that's genuinely, that's something I'm proud of, like really, really proud of. There's a team of boys there. They're all absolutely spot on. It's a nice place to work. It's a cool fishery. And I haven't fished my lake very much, I will say that. But that lake there's going to be some cool fishing.
No surprise, it's the best one.
Obviously not. Once it got named, I was like, right, well, we are going to...
Yeah.
No, that was always going to be the specimen lake.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's some really cool fishing there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're all going to look forward to seeing what Embryo does, and mate, I hope you do find or create the perfect lake for you within the portfolio. But
be nice, yeah.
But fascinating insight, Matt. Thank you so much for coming in, mate.
That's all right, Rich. No, it's nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cheers, Matt.
Cheers, mate.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.